Okay, now I'm just going to go over to my channel and make sure that it is running. And it looks like the stream is started up. Okay, so you should be able to copy that link now on my channel if you want to. And then from there, you can put it wherever you want.
Whoa, I can see it all now. Sweet.
Yeah, there
We're
you go.
online. All right, I'm going to post this to mine.
Okay, and I'm also just going to get the chat open while you guys gather. I hope that everyone is doing well today. I guess you guys know Joey did a bit of a formal debate recently over at Cambridge University. So when he's done sharing out the link and I'm done getting the chat window visible, then we're going to make our way through that debate. So yeah, that's the plan for today. How long ago was this anyway? I guess you released it a bit after it was recorded, right?
It was the same day I did the BBC radio debate.
You're all over the place, dude.
Yeah.
All right. You got your share going there? If not, then if the chat wants to ask anything before we start up, I am reading you guys currently. Nice sofa. Yeah, it's not actually my sofa. This is my buddy's place. As you guys know, my computer setup is a tad hurtin', so when I do these streams, I go to my buddy Armand's house.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just share it on. Whoa.
Yeah, no, take your time. Share it wherever you want. I'll just chat with the chat until you're good. Take your time. You got some comments here. You're an inspiration, Joey. What's my favorite fruit? Favorite fruit? I'm thinking like probably a strawberry or a watermelon or something. He likes watermelon. These people. Isaac, what's your opinion on bestiality? I mean, why even ask me my opinion on bestiality? You guys all know that I think it's no, I'm kidding. Yeah, bestiality is like obviously not ethical. An animal can't consent. You shouldn't be like raping an animal. Like, why would you even ask that? Sup, Isaac? Do these more often? Yeah, you know, can do that.
I guess the question is, why are you thinking about bestiality? What do you need? Are you asking for permission, or is it just a hypothetical?
Yeah, look, dude, I'm not giving you moral approval for your weird fucking shit. We're just here to talk about philosophy, okay? Keep your bestiality to your own little corner of the internet.
All right, completely none. Okay. Yeah, everything's shared out. I'm ready to rock.
Alrighty. Any words about the debate before we just get right into it? Like how it came about or just anything that comes to your mind?
I just got an email and they said, we're doing a debate. You want to come down? And I was actually in Indonesia at the time. And I was like, well, you know, but then spontaneously I come to London and I just quickly got in contact with them and said, yeah, I'll come down and do it, because I thought it's out of my comfort zone. I've never done this before, so I thought I'll just give it a crack.
Mm-hmm. What did you think? What did you think of the opposition? Like, obviously, in this context, you're coming up against people who've taken time to prepare arguments against you. Presumably, they're somewhat smart if they're university students. So it's a bit like more challenging, I think would be fair to say, than just the average street conversation with a random person who hasn't prepared arguments against you, right? So how did you feel about the just the context of it, how good the opposition was?
Well, I don't know. It's kind of like you can say things really elaborately and intelligently, but still not make sense. You know what I mean? And still be contradicting your own logic. So yeah. I mean, I just had a couple of notes written down and like 3 notes, and then I was just like going off the top of my head when I set my proposition out there. I was just, to be honest, I was quite confident because I think it's indefensible.
Sure.
I just basically thought it was indefensible, like they've got no chance. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I think that's true. I think that, like, obviously, you might come up against someone who can weave some complex sophistry to make a position sound like it makes sense. But at base, like, no matter what, you're just arguing for a Holocaust, and, you know,
Yeah.
you're going to be able to show some kind of problem, most likely, with what they're saying. It's hard to advocate for a Holocaust without opening yourself up for some criticism. Okay, let's just delve into it. And if you want the video to stop, just start talking, and I'll just hit the pause button. You can just comment wherever we want.
This Lent term. On behalf of the committee, I'd just like to thank you all for taking the time to come to this debate, and a special thank you to our external debater, Joey, for giving up his time to come. And Joey's a well-known animal liberation and vegan activist with a YouTube channel that currently has in excess of 79,000 subscribers. So just before we get into it, we'll briefly just recap the rules of the structure of the debate that we use here at FITS. So all speakers will have 7 minutes to speak with no interruptions from the audience. After 6 minutes, I will knock just to signal that the speaker has 1 minute left to complete their speech. And after each speech, I will briefly open the floor up to both the audience and people on the panel to ask questions on that speech that they've just heard. And then following the speeches from all 4 speakers, we'll open up the floor more generally for a Q&A directed to all speakers. And then at the end, we'll take a final vote on the motion. So before we start, I'd just like to take an initial vote and try and gauge kind of opinion in the room. So you have the option to abstain if you wish. So could all those who support the motion, meat is murder, raise your hand?
You're going to look back in shame.
Okay, I'm just going to say that's 90% of the room.
Whoa.
Pretty split house, I think.
Whoa, why is there such a high amount of people supporting the minority position there? Like,
Because I put out a link and said, hey, I'm going to be doing a debate. I'm going to be doing a debate at, this college, and come along. And a bunch of people came along.
Oh, that's so funny. So there's actually so many people who are encouraged by you sharing that link that it just massively tilted the audience in your favor. That's pretty funny.
There was a couple of, just off topic, there was a couple of your people that you'd turned vegan there.
People who I've turned vegan?
They come up to me and they'd watch your channel and they would, it was cool, man.
Oh, I thought me turning people vegan was a myth. So, that's interesting to hear that the myth is a reality.
Okay, we've got 80 to 90% of the room. And then could all those opposed now raise your hand?
Uh-oh.
Wow. Like, I mean, that's like, it's funny, but it's just hilarious that it's tilted that far. Like, I mean, is this just I would picture Cambridge University having like a big old debate society where there would be like, a bunch of their people there, and that would be the general population more or less. So you'd see like a lot of meat eaters. There's like 2 hands that went up.
Dude, this is one of the biggest audiences they've had. And also, like, I was supposed to be debating this guy who was quite well known in the media for actually, and he lost his job for saying that we should murder vegans. And he said it as a joke.
Oh.
Yeah, he said it as a joke. So this guy was supposed to be, so I was like getting ready to debate this guy, and he pulled out the day before. But apparently it was because he was given the wrong day to come to the debate. But I don't know about that.
I think he's just scared of you, Joey.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess so. If another person who's sort of at your level of popularity was there, then they would have presumably had their followers come and be in the audience also, and then it would have been, maybe a bit less slanted. But yeah, I mean, whatever. Let's get into it. That's just really funny. I was surprised to see so many hands go up there. I honestly thought he'd ask that question and there would be like a handful of like vegans who just kind of like me, like I think the Holocaust is bad, and then most of the room would just be like not caring.
Okay, so that's 10. And any abstentions? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so we've got about 7 there. Okay, now I'll introduce our first speaker tonight, who's William Phelps. chairman of KUKA,
What's KUKA?
and exotic meats officer for the Monday Steak Club, a campaign, a society to end meat-free Mondays in Churchill College. Please give him a round.
He wants to end meat-free Mondays, this guy. He's opposed, like, he's chairman of the steak board and exotic meats, and he wants to end meat-free Mondays, and interesting.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it's always sort of worth distinguishing between a carnist and an anti-vegan, right?
Yeah.
All anti-vegans are carnists. Not all carnists are anti-vegans, right? There's a lot of carnists who will actually say they agree with veganism. This is why the term lip service is used like so much. Who will actually say they agree intellectually with veganism, but they're just like hypocritical. They can't get their behavior to align. It doesn't really make sense to call them anti-vegan. Now, there are exception cases like AIU who will say he's not anti-vegan, but then say things that are directly anti-vegan. So, you know, there's also a reality of assessing where someone falls. They aren't always where they say they fall, but these two things are distinct. So it's interesting that they have like a straight up anti-vegan debating you. Because, you know, presumably if you're opposing something like Meat-Free Monday, like that's actually opposing a vegan or at least animal rights initiative, right? So to me, that puts you beyond the camp of just being like a regular everyday carnist.
No, thank you very much. I just thought that before we sort of launch into the wider questions and implications that are raised by the motion at hand, we need to cut through some, I'd say, intellectual dishonesty, which surrounds the whole motion and debate as to whether meat is murder. What we commonly hear surrounding the whole meat is murder, and indeed just the wider vegan discussion, are points made about free lifestyle choices,
actually?
the environment.
I could also say something. What do you think about the proposition?
His proposition?
No, the debate proposition. So for anyone who's not watched a formal debate before, a debate usually has a proposition, right? A proposition, you're talking about logic, you're talking about something that can be true or false, right? And the debate is usually one side saying it's true, the other saying it's false. Like there's a pro and a con side. So the proposition here is meat is murder, right? So, I mean, I know that your opinion is that it is, but I'm just asking if you have any like technical qualms with the proposition, because I could raise like little technical qualms with how the proposition is actually even phrased here.
They came up. A few technical things came up like in the debate, but for me, I didn't look. I just assumed people took meat as in you know, how we all think of as meat, you know, the murdered flesh of an animal. But
yeah, because
the
proposition,
it's very open, isn't it? It wasn't very specific.
Well, yeah, because this is like one of those things where there's like technical wiggle room because of the imprecision of the proposition, right? Like, I mean, I can point to meat that you don't think is murder, right? You would agree that lab meat is meat, and you would agree that if it's created really, like, truly without hurting animals, then it's not murder, right?
Agree.
So, yeah, so that's kind of annoying because that's like a technical point that they can score that you might be able to, if you framed it correctly, like play off the audience with something like that. But yeah, I mean, because the proposition's not as specific as something like the general method that animals are killed in slaughter is murder, right? Like that's like easier to argue. So yeah, I could raise like little technical qualms with it, but it's clear enough that you can probably blow off someone who's going to be like, oh, well, what about lab meat? You can be like, okay, well, look, I'm obviously not talking about lab meat, and it would probably play fine. But you know, just pointing out little imprecision on the proposition there.
Animal welfare and the capacity for animal sentience and so on and so forth. Now, what I will say very openly and very freely is that these all hold individual merit, and I think they can all be discussed individually, and I would argue all constitute quite a separate discussion. But separate to those, and I'd say obviously, well, indeed, it's what we're discussing this evening, we need to ask ourselves, is meat murder? Not merely immoral, not merely something to be prevented, to be cut down on, to be, say, reviewed, but is it murder? Now, the first question is, well, what do we mean by...
Okay, I'm not going to rewind it, but he just said something was a separate discussion, and if he was, I didn't catch what he was talking about, but I'm not sure it was, in fact, a separate discussion, fundamentally. Just have to flag that.
murder. It's a term which is commonly employed. You know, we always have the slogan "meat is murder," the T-shirts "meat is murder," and so on and so forth. But what do we really mean when we say murder? Now, in a very basic sense, now forgive me, I've used the OED, not the Superior Cambridge English Dictionary, which says that murder is unlawful, premeditated killing of one human being to another.
I haven't heard that before.
Why is it that the dictionary?
How original! I didn't expect him to say. I honestly didn't expect him to whip out that. Like, I did not preemptively expect him to whip out that meaning.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy when people like spend so much time developing their philosophy that they actually come at you with an argument that you've never heard before, that like has not been said by millions of carnists to every vegan who's ever been alive. Like, it's really cool when people do that.
Also, like, hey, what are you cherry picking definitions now?
Oh yeah,
like it's the only one.
Well, if we're gonna actually not just rip on him and talk about the logic of why it's wrong, yeah, well, obviously it's just cherry picking the definition. It's selectively saying, look, here's a definition by which vegans can call it murder. Here's a definition by which you can't. I'm just going to select this definition and not accept that one. It's like, well, and that's also why a debate like this is kind of weird framing, because like whether it's murder, it depends firstly on what you mean by meat. Can we count things like lab meat? Can we count, like, what are we talking about exactly, as we just discussed, you and I, Joey? And then there's also murder. It's like, well, there's more than one definition of murder, right? So there's this sort of selection of what we're talking about that, like, ideally, if you had a good proposition, you would just try to limit that. Like, a better proposition would be something like, we should go vegan, right? Like, that's a bit more straightforward.
Definition says one human being to another. And the reason I would say is one which underpins society as we know it, civil society, civil democracy, is that society is something you participate in. You take things from society, you receive certain rights. You receive legislative protection from murder, for example, as we've just shown, and you give certain things in return, such as tax. And all of this is underscored by a basic belief in equality before law. And this is the crux of the argument. It's about equality, right? So all of these discussions of meat is it environmentally friendly? What about animal welfare?
Wait, that's a straw man right there. So right there, like, I think what he's saying that the vegan position, that when we're having the discussion about meat is murder, the vegan position, it's all, the vegan's frame is that this is about equality for animals in some way. Like, that's the kind of thing I just heard him say. And obviously...
He actually goes further. He says radical equality.
Well, okay, then that would, I mean... It's a
definite straw man. Like, he goes, like, radical equality.
It's also a weird
like,
thing,
in every way.
Well, does equality even need, like, a qualifier like that? There might be something weird about even the phrasing radical equality, but setting that aside, though, yeah, like, it's very obvious that a vegan doesn't have to hold a position that animals are equal, right? Now, some vegans do hold that position, and I guess since we have your audience here, who I haven't like shat on this meme in front of a million times, I will just shit on it quickly right now. To the vegans who do say all life is equal, that's a stupid position, okay? The reason it's a stupid position is that you end up having to make statements like this. If you're given the choice of flipping a coin and killing either a human baby or swatting a fly, okay, there's no third option. This is a philosophical situation. We're giving you a dichotomous choice. There's no, I would sacrifice myself or something like this. You'd have to say flip a coin, right? But most people are going to agree, like, look, I don't think you should, or at least most vegans, I think, who are reasonable would agree, look, I don't think that you should swat a fly for no reason. I don't think you should just harm a fly. Why would you do that? But if you're given a choice between two beings who are vastly different in their level of sentience, like, if we let the kid live out its life, there's going to be vastly more well-being in that life than in the fly's life, right? Like, the fly's going to be dead in a certain amount of hours. They don't even live that long. It's clear we would want the human baby to survive, right? So whether you're even, and I'd also point out, even if you agree with that crazy stuff, like, oh, if you have to kill a fly or a human, flip a coin, even if you're a vegan who agrees with that, you should be able to technically realize that someone could be a vegan and not hold that position, right? They could still hold the position that it's wrong to be killing flies for no reason, but not be saying so based on a notion that flies and humans are equal or something like this. So this position is a straw man of veganism because it doesn't apply to veganism generally, right? It applies to a subset of vegan positions.
Agree.
Of animals. They, I would say, dodge the point slightly, because it's radical equality is really what we're talking about here this evening.
You're right, yeah, it does.
And in order to propose that meat is murder, therefore, you need to say that there is radical equality and we must have radical equality.
And look, I'd have to think this through to know if what I'm saying makes 100% sense, but I think that the term radical equality is just technically weird, because I think something is either equal or it isn't. I don't think there are degrees of equality. So there's kind of a weird framing there, but yeah.
And that actually we should reduce the status of the human to that of the animal. And we must compare the animal and the human on equal footing and on equal terms. They are completely equal, and we must therefore afford them equal rights.
It's a massive
Because
straw
murder,
man.
if we
Joey,
are to...
give me some words on what you think about the use of the term equal.
Well, like, there are certain things that we could, share equally, like, the equal right, like certain rights, like the equal right to live without being subjugated, without being murdered and used as products, but when he's talking about equality, complete radical equality in every sense, like, who the hell's arguing for that position? We don't even afford that to certain human beings, like a lot of human beings, like children, the mentally disabled,
Sure.
So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I'd actually push back a tiny bit on one thing you said there, because I would agree that there are some rights that both humans and animals should have, right? So I believe that we should both have the right to not be murdered. I think that's straightforward enough. But I don't think that animals have that right to the same degree as a human, right? Like, I think a fly has a right to not be murdered. But I think that if you have to violate that right for either a fly or a human, that it's better to violate it for the fly. And I'd also point out that this is not an anthropocentric position, right? Because if there's a being that's more sentient than a human, then if you have a choice of violating a human's rights or violating that thing's rights, you should violate the human's rights, right? So you might say it's a sentiocentric position, but it's not an anthropocentric position.
Human, it's murder, and if I were to kill an animal, it's murder. We must grant equality. But to any person of sound mind, I would say that this, I think, is ridiculous. I mean, on the one hand, we have the implications.
It's the definition of a straw man, right?
If we're going to afford legal equality to animals, I mean, what other social equality?
Legal equality.
Should animals pay tax? Should they be
Give
able
them the
to
right
vote?
to drive, Joey.
Should they indeed go to prison and be able to own property? And you may laugh, you may say, oh, this is reductionist.
Own property.
But really, this is the sort of logic you open yourself up to when you use such extreme terms such as murder. When you say, oh, to eat meat is murder. Because that is really what lies at the core of the issue. And furthermore, if I were to hit a rabbit with my car, should I go to prison for manslaughter? If I were to go rabbiting, for example, as any rural man is wont to do, should I be tried for murder? If we introduce this idea that meat is murder and that animals are radically equal in America, should I face the death penalty for shooting a rabbit? And again, I think to most people of sound mind, the answer is no. And why is that? I'd say on the one hand, it's because as humans, as sort of brethren in species, we know that there is a certain quality to us that is, I would argue, more complex. That is a certain set of emotions, of desires, and a worldview which animals simply don't have. We are a separate species.
Okay.
Hey, let's talk about
And I think
sorry.
taking this into
No, it's all
account,
good.
just when he said, should we be tried for manslaughter for running over a rabbit? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, this is just the kind of thing I was referring to, right? Which is you can have rights to different degrees. Like, you might say, like, for manslaughter for running over a rabbit. Like, first of all, there's a problem of if you hit a human and it's legitimately an accident, right? Like, some footage reveals that, like, the human just ran out in front of your car and you didn't see them or have time to stop. Like, you're not getting charged with manslaughter, you know what I mean? Or
Wait. If you run over someone's kid by a complete accident, can you be completely absolved of that?
And
Or do they take into account, responsibility of your negligence and stuff like that?
look, I don't know the legal side perfectly well, and it could even be that you get charged but not necessarily convicted. But what I know is that there is no way in our legal system that if evidence comes out that you were not being negligent, and like it's possible to hit someone without being negligent, obviously. If you were not being negligent and the fault was totally on the other party, there's no way that you are going to jail for that.
I want to make another point.
Yeah.
If you run over someone's dog, I suppose the dog is their property. But if you accidentally run over, yeah, but that's even the dogs are considered property. But yeah, like they would go through it and see if you were negligent. Did you deliberately run over the dog? If you deliberately run over someone's dog, you're in trouble. But yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. So there's basically like I think there's two main things that I would want to say about that. So like the first is that the analogy is a little weird because you're basing it off the assumption that if you hit a human, then you're getting charged with manslaughter, right? And I don't know how the charging process works. If everyone gets charged and then only some get convicted, or if you only get charged under certain circumstances. Like I don't know about the law like that. But what I do know is that morally speaking, it's certainly not reasonable for someone to be punished if they truly accidentally hit a being, right? And I guarantee, I don't know the exact law, but I guarantee that legally, if it's shown that it was a legitimate accident and you were not behaving negligently, that you're not going to go to jail or get in any kind of trouble for that. So there's the first problem of starting from the assumption that in the human case, you would in fact automatically get in some kind of trouble for this. And then there's the second assumption of not taking into account context, right? So like we could say that an animal has a basic right not to be murdered, but we might not. So it might not be murder in the context where they're hit, and then even if it's shown that the killing was intentional, we might say there's a punishment for this, but it's a less strong punishment, right? Like I think that this stuff, there's a really technical and interesting philosophical question about like just how strong should the punishments be for different kind of actions. But I'm very open to the notion that it's reasonable that the punishments be different for intentionally killing a human, or like let's say beating a human, or like intentionally beating. Wait, just let me finish this one. Or intentionally beating a dog, right? Like if you beat a dog in public in the street, you will still get in trouble with the law. But I'm open to the notion that based on some kind of gap in sentience, the punishment should not be as severe as for beating a human. But that doesn't put either in the camp of being morally okay, or you shouldn't get in trouble for it.
As long as we don't have a double standard for lower sentient humans and animals, because like
Sure.
if we're going to rely on sentience alone, as long as there's not some speciesism telling us that so if you run over this less sentient dog or rabbit, you get less of a punishment for running over a human being of the same sentience level, like a small child. Would we hold a double standard in law as well for a small child and a rabbit? What about a small mentally disabled child that doesn't have the sentience of a rabbit?
Yeah. Yeah, that stuff is really interesting because just talking about the morality is a bit easier, right? You can kind of put it in the general bucket of like right or wrong. But then choosing like what level of punishment is appropriate, that's like a bit different. And if you're talking about, keeping a consistent legal standard, then yeah, I mean, we don't seem to want to say that the punishment should be less severe for striking like a mentally disabled person, right? So it could be that the standard, it really should be treated like murder if it's an animal over a certain level of sentience. But I do think that there's got to be a breakdown point on that, because there's no way that swatting a fly is murder. Like, I mean, well, like you might say it's like you could still call it murder in the sense of being like wanton killing, right? But you wouldn't say that someone should go to jail for like decades for swatting a fly. Like, and I think that if you had a human at that low a level of sentience, you probably could make a case like that. Especially if you add in features like the human is like, they're so small that they're easy to like damage unintentionally. But I guess if it's by accident, it's not murder. Either way, look, I think that the broad picture, though, is like, look, we can put these at morally, it's clear. We can talk about what kind of things are right, what kind of things are wrong when we've got sufficiently clear cases. But legally, what exact standard to set is hard. I'm open to the arguments that say that the standard should be different on something like animal abuse or beating a human, but I'm not open to the kind of arguments that say there should be no punishment for it, right?
And also, he's setting his position based on the fact that murder is a crime by law, not just an act to take someone's life from them, like the other definitions are to kill brutally, to slay wantonly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, he talked about hitting someone with a car and it being manslaughter. So I kind of tried to cover that with my first point of just saying, like, look, you're not always going to get, like, in trouble for hitting someone with a car. Like, I don't know the exact legal terms or whatever, but yeah, I mean, so even starting from that position is kind of weird. So yeah, but this is the thing, right? Is like, we should just be honest about areas where we're not totally certain. Like, I don't know exactly how we want to calibrate our laws. I mean, that's like an open question that people can go and work out. And a vegan doesn't have to task themselves with responding to all of those things, right? You can just talk about what you're clear on. What I'm clear on is that if you were to intentionally hit a rabbit with your car, that would be fucked up. And if you truly hit one by accident, that's an accident. What exact degree of punishment is appropriate? And that's just, I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't know.
You know, the sad thing is there's like stricter laws for littering than there is for running over a rabbit.
Well, that seems,
you know
like,
what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that seems morally insane, right? Like, there's no way that the punishment should be stronger for littering than for murdering a sentient being, yeah. Well, I guess, sorry, to be clear, if you're saying hitting a rabbit by accident, that would be different, but... Yeah.
No, like, even intentionally running over a rabbit, like, I don't know, like, no one would even investigate it, like... I mean, maybe if they filmed it and put it on Facebook and it went viral, they'd be held accountable for it, but, you know, I don't know.
Yep. Yeah. So let's continue.
Combined with the very troubling implications of such radical absolutism, the view that, for example, the death of an infant child
this right
is
here,
to be held.
Radical absolutism. When we sit here and talk about this, the kind of things we end up doing are like, yeah, like the morality of hitting the thing with the car seems clear enough to me, but like, you know, we don't know exactly how to process that legally. Like, is there a case for some level of different treatment? How do we treat a human who's like at that level of sentience who gets hit? Where's the breakdown point? Like, we'll sit here and have a philosophical discussion about exactly what kind of punishment is appropriate, right? So that's just the proof right there that we're not sitting here with some kind of absolutist position. You know what I mean? So this, again, like, his whole thing is a straw man, but just this, it's just further kind of evidence that it's a straw man. When he's saying we'd hold some absolute position that, oh yeah, you should, I won't recite it all, the rabbit person should go to jail, and we sit here questioning exactly what should happen. That's pretty clear. It's not absolute.
Equal to the death of a goat raises serious questions. So what I would argue at its core is, you know, I'm not going to criticize the vegan choice. I'm not going to criticize concerns for animal welfare, concerns about the environment, concerns about the harmful health effects of meat. They're all completely valid and I think deserve discussion. But to suggest that meat is murder, and to take the implications of that and say, well, look, we should afford radical equality to animals, is simply not a sustainable view to take. The implications are dangerous, and I would argue it actually denigrates both the status of man and animals in society. So I would fully support and encourage concern.
Yeah, so basically, his argument, it's sort of like, you could set it up like a disjunctive syllogism, right? So he's saying, look, either meat is not murder, or we believe in radical equality, right? So it's starting with those two positions, and then it's saying, okay, well, we don't believe in radical equality, therefore meat is not murder. So that would be a formal way to set up the argument as a disjunctive syllogism, right? Either meat is not murder, or we believe in radical equality. We don't believe in radical equality, therefore meat is not murder, right? So now the problem with an argument like that is the first premise, right? Which is just false. It's not the case that if we call meat murder, we're committed to this belief in radical equality.
Yeah.
About animal welfare, concern about animal rights, concern about the environment and about health. But declaring meat as murder, I would say, is not the right way to do it. And for that reason, I would urge you to oppose the motion. Thank you.
I will briefly take a few questions from the audience. Yeah, Eric at the back.
So at one point, you suggested that you asked rhetorically, should we give animals voting rights? Should we send them to prison? So I think we'd all agree that the killing of, say, a 1-year-old child would be murder. But we don't give babies responsibilities of citizens. We don't send them to prison. We don't ask them to vote. There's no reason that respect for something for a right to life implies responsibility as a citizen.
No, I think that's obviously a valid point. I'll stand by.
Yeah, so that was a kind of strange comment. Did he actually say at some point in there that the rights of individuals derives from their ability to reciprocate responsibility?
I think he said it doesn't.
Because like that's that kind of position. Look, if he does hold that kind of position, that leads to really weird things, like humans who can't reciprocate, like mentally disabled or something. It's fine to kill. But I don't actually know if he said that, so that might have been a slightly unfair attack. I'd have to watch it over to know. Right, because the thrust of what he was saying sounded to me to be more about. Like, oh, we have to believe in some kind of radical equality, and we're committed to all these like insane positions, right?
It's an odd comparison to make.
No, but it's a valid one nonetheless. And what I would say is that, do we believe that babies have the same capabilities and abilities that an adult man has? Would we trust a baby to vote? Would we trust a baby to drive a car? Would we trust a baby to carry firearms? The answer is no. And the reason the answer is no is not because we believe that babies are inferior or of a completely lower status. It's because we recognise that we are different as grown people, different to them. In the same way that I would argue, we must recognise, in virtue of being humans, that we are different to animals and therefore must treat them differently, not in a notion of radical equality.
I've got a question.
Okay, I want to hear your question there, but just differently, this big blanket term, like, I mean, what are you slipping in under differently? Like, sure, I would agree that I should treat a dog differently than a human in the sense of, like, I would consider it appropriate to fall in love with a human, and I wouldn't consider it appropriate to fall in love, like, romantically with a dog, right? That seems kind of insane. But then there's differences that don't seem legitimate, right? Like, it doesn't seem legitimate to have a difference in treatment of like stabbing one but not the other, right? so it's like, what are you?
It's kind of like he was like, it's almost like he nearly got there. Like he was nearly. I was just like, did you just outline our argument? Like, I was waiting for him to get to the point. Like, but yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like, just what are you shoehorning in there with the word difference? Like, there's things we'll all agree, like, yeah, treat them differently, that's good, and then there's things that we probably won't agree, right?
Not this.
No, and yeah, so, and I don't know about that question, because his whole question was asking, like, about, like, basically, do you think that rights, like, derive from being able to return responsibilities? Which, again, if someone does hold that position, then it has some pretty funny conclusions. But I don't actually know if that is the guy's position. It sounded more like he was just saying that, look, if you believe in veganism, you believe in this radical equality stuff. So I don't know if I try to be fair to both sides, right? I don't know if the vegans question was totally fair there, but, so let's hear what you had to say to this.
What is that difference? What is the morally significant difference between an infant baby and a lamb, like you suggested, that gives us justification to stab a lamb in the neck with a knife, take their life from them, and for some reason killing that baby child, that human child, would be considered murder? But there must be some morally significant difference as to why it's not considered murder to take the life of that lamb.
No, the whole moral discussion, it's a big one, and I think we can go on it.
Basically, just running
what I
the
would
trade
ask
right
in return,
there.
I think this sums up the issue.
Yeah, in my own way, it was name the trait, for sure.
Would you feel as comfortable killing an infant child as you would a goat?
So I would just point out right there that he didn't answer your question, right?
No.
So he dodged your question by asking you a question.
Yeah. And he asked me about my feelings towards killing a baby and killing a chicken or killing a goat, like my feelings towards it don't tell you whether or not it's moral.
Right. Yep. And I mean, I'm sure you're about to say that, and you're a very like polite guy for all I know. So I mean, you probably let them just kind of like throw you off and ask you a question, like, you know, because that's what a nice person would do. But
it's not debate. I get in trouble here.
You get in trouble
because it's question and answer time. Like we'll see.
I
can't contest or ask or push on him here.
Okay.
Yeah.
We need to do a brief derail to complain about formal debate for a second then. But before that, yeah, so him asking you a question, like, look, it's fine for you to go down the road of just answering, playing along, whatever. But it's also fair, and like you might feel more inclined to do this if it's been a while and the guy's obviously being dishonest. It's not like the start of the conversation, but it is fair to just respond to that by saying, look, I asked you a question and you just asked me a question in response. I don't know what your answer is, so could you answer me? Right? It is fair to do that if you want to do that. And then just the formal debate thing. Look, I get formal debates. I think that they're good. I prefer informal where you can really pigeonhole someone. But does this at least have a cross-examination period?
Yeah, at the end.
Okay, where you get to grill him.
We get into it. Don't you worry.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Because, you know, like, look, they're good for different things. Like, an informal debate is like a conversation. Two sides kind of collide and you see how they deal with each other's points. That gives you a lot of information on how two frameworks interface, and that's good. But then there's also debates that are more formal with big allotted time slices for each side to talk. And those are better for like gaining a kind of more in-depth understanding of the individual sides' perspectives, not so much about seeing how the sides collide with each other. But I do have always a bit of a pet peeve. Like, people can do what they want, but I've always had a pet peeve with formal debate that doesn't at least have a cross-examination period. Because you've got to be able to corner the other guy. Like, they say all of this crazy stuff throughout the debate, and you're like, oh, like, I just want 5 minutes where I can just ask him questions and just paint him into a corner. So, yeah, that's what I'd say about formal debate.
Well,
to which the answer I would hope is...
Sorry, it is question and answer.
Okay.
There will be other people who want to
There'll be an
ask
option at the end.
To which the answer I would hope is no.
Okay.
Now, I mean, I try not to be intuitive and intuitionist when it comes to morality, but I think the fact there is that block in the first place suggests that there is something of a hierarchy of treatment.
I mean, it's difficult in what you say, because if you take like the massacre in Rwanda and things like that, I wasn't there, so I didn't experience. But it became very easy for a human to kill another human because they weren't of the right type. And it sounds, a lot of what you say is, I could imagine a slave master talking about why those group of people don't have any rights, even though they were human beings, they were different and rightless. And it just seems that, okay, that was then, but we're now, and we do understand that there are beings that can experience joy and happiness and a sense of freedom, the desire to be a parent to the lamb or whatever, or, you know, or the lamb to dance, you know. So it's very subjective, your view. You know, you have your cultural belief that it's okay. You were brought up that it's okay to have killed animal on your plate. I was brought up that way. But as you become aware, then of course your morality can change, because it's an awareness, it's a subjective point of view.
No, of course, and I think, you know, cultural relativism will always play a part in these discussions. But equally, if you're arguing that morality is completely subjective, you could say, well, you know, maybe tomorrow or in 100 years' time, our morality will shift to the point where we have.
This is always a road that I recommend not going down in vegan debates. Like, there's no need to get into conversations about meta-ethics, right? Like, he's talking about right now the Karnas guy you're facing. He's talking about whether morality is objective or subjective, right? Like that's something that, like, you can run a vegan argument that doesn't require someone to take a position on the nature of morality, right? Like you can name the trait, for example. That's just a consistency argument, right? You can say, look, as long as you have moral beliefs on the table, I can run a consistency argument on them regardless of whether you think those beliefs are grounded objectively or subjectively. Because the reason why it's a bad pathway to go down is because then you have to win all this meta-ethical terrain just to land points that you could land anyway without having to win the meta-ethical terrain. So, yeah. And then the other guy, like, I guess he didn't totally lead him into meta-ethics because he didn't, he didn't even ask a question. It was kind of a statement, but he said things about, like, morality being subjective and cultural and all this, and it's like, look, just the criticism should just be to point out the conclusions of the other guy's view and see if people agree with them. Like, just why he believes it or whatnot is not, like, or what the nature of morality is. I just think that's not the best way to go down. Like, look, that guy calls his view subjective. Like, someone who knows some philosophy could just spin that around. You could just be like, well, I mean, your view is subjective as well, right? Like, you hold something to be wrong. Why is that wrong? Well, for reason X. Okay, and why does reason X make it wrong? Oh, for reason Y. Okay, and why does reason Y? And you can just go all the way down until at some point they just hit something irreducible, right? That's like the word they'd use in philosophy. And they just have to assert something to be morally good, right? And then you can make a pretty compelling case that that is just that person expressing some kind of desire they have, right? So it's not great to criticize the other side on grounds of having a subjective morality because they can turn it around on you. It's better to criticize their position on grounds of its conclusions, because then if it has conclusions that people just won't get on board with, then you've done your work. You've shown people what they can't agree with about the position.
Epic.
We're slaughtering 10 times the animals we need, and we are effectively employing the meat industry on steroids. I think that relativism is it's not a. I wouldn't use it as a base to contravene what I'm saying as such. But I think in response to the idea that maybe animals do have this sentience that you don't appreciate.
That's so
I think
weird.
That's fair enough.
Okay, I mean, look, this guy says.
Having sort of
sorry, I can't pause it.
Being brethren in speech.
This guy says so many weird things that I'm gonna have to not comment on everything, or we'd be here for like 12 hours, like when I did that debate review with Avi. Because he just said like relativism is a weird basis to contravene what I'm saying. Like, I don't even know what he thinks he means when he's saying that. Like, I mean, was the questioner trying to say that relativism is true and that poses some kind of problem for your view? Like, he just seems to be vaguely responding to him. So, I don't know.
Species and appreciating our wants and our needs, and indeed not just the needs of those in the West, but the needs of those in the East as well, who are poorer societies, can't afford the replacements that are often espoused, sort of different types of milk and so forth. We do need to take into account, I would say, that there are certain arbitrary lines that need to be drawn, but there are certain things we can do,
or
indeed should be able to do.
Yeah!
And I think perhaps then it becomes more an issue of...
Oh, God. Poorer countries can't afford, £7 vegan cheese, so therefore, we have to continue holocausting billions of animals. Like, dude, if I hear that poor argument one more time, like, rice is the cheapest food per calorie on Earth. On Earth. And if you can grow rice, you can grow greens and bananas, and, I just don't know where people think, like, meat is some, like, poor people's. Like, who's told... Where has this myth come from that meat is some, staple for poor villagers? Like, it's a luxury. Growing animals takes resources and food, and, like, I don't know, like...
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that look, a lot of places that don't have much money grow vegan food, but it's not. It obviously would not be fair to compare like fancy vegan products to just like to use those as the example when comparing to meat instead of the cheap vegan things that like so many poor countries eat, like lentils or rice or whatever else. But there's also this point of like, look, even if they were to point out some group of people somewhere for whom it's cheaper to eat meat, right? It's like, that's not a justification, okay? Look, if there's some group out there who it's cheaper for them to just fucking assassinate people, right? Like, are you going to say that's an ethical thing for them to do? Or are you going to say they have an obligation to do the more expensive thing? I'm just making the point that even if it were pragmatically true, which it's generally speaking not, it still wouldn't make their case.
It's like the other day, last night, Ed did a debate with a guy who was telling us that sheep farming is actually better for the environment. And I was just thinking, like, even if that were true, it wouldn't morally justify having, like, if breeding human slaves were better for the biodiversity of a field, that wouldn't morally justify it. Right. And I was just thinking, like, we can get into that argument, but I felt like that was a diversion. Like, I would have said, look, that would not justify murdering sheep or enslaving sheep. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because there's always, like, there's two pathways, right, that the things can be criticized on. There's, like, a pragmatic pathway and there's a principled pathway, right? So the pragmatic pathway is where you squabble with them. I guess I maybe shouldn't call it squabble for the people who like going down this pathway, but it's where you battle it out with the person over the real world details of what they've said. Like, well, are there people, well, like, what do meat products cost? Like, let's do a quantitative analysis of like the average products that, you know, people buy in different areas of the earth and see what comes out cheaper. And like, can you really make your case? Or like, if it's the sheep and environment stuff, like getting into the details of the impact of sheep on the environment, like, look, you could try to win that, and that's the pragmatic debate, but then there's also just the principled point, right? And the principled point, that's where you grant their pragmatics, right? You just grant for the sake of argument that it's economically or environmentally superior to farm sheep, or, you know, whatever it is they're saying, it's cheaper to buy meat. And then you ask, does the argument fly if we grant that assumption, right? And if not, then you've got a principled problem with the argument. Now, my general rule, I know people like, some of you guys know Avi, the doctor, like he always likes to hit both. He likes to do pragmatic and principled. I don't run the do both algorithm. The way I do it is I always respond to the principled point unless the pragmatic point would actually stop the principled point from landing, in which case then I'll deal with the pragmatics, right? So like if someone makes a point like, you know, look, if someone's trying to kill you, then it would be ethical to stop them from killing you, surely, right? Like that's a case where I'd agree with the pragmatics. I'd agree with the pragmatics. So it's like I couldn't have any principled problem with that. Sorry, is what I mean to say. Like, sure, if someone's trying to kill you, then you have a right to defend yourself. But the pragmatics are, what I don't agree with. They're false, right? Because it's not the case that animals are trying to kill you. So that's a case where it's like you can't grant the pragmatics, because if you grant the pragmatics, then they can land this reasonable point and feel like, well, okay, well, I guess it is okay to kill animals, you know, if someone's trying to kill you. So my rule is kind of like always go for the principled point, only address the pragmatics if leaving them unaddressed would cause you not to be able to land the principled point.
So do you think like so maybe like let's just say he hits me with the sheep environment, like he's just really like, and he's like, oh, you know, it's really good for you. And I say, well, like, I'm not, like, I could just quickly address the pragmatics and go, oh, well, I'm not sure that that's true. But even if it were true, it wouldn't justify this. Exactly. So like just quickly addressing it so people who at home or whoever's the audience is know that I've addressed it with like skepticism. Like, yes. I don't think that well, I don't believe that that's true. I don't know if that's true, but even if it were, it doesn't change this fact, which would be the principal point. Yeah.
And I actually agree that that's an important thing to do, because you don't want it to come across that you're actually granting the pragmatics, right? You always want to be clear that you're just granting them for the sake of argument.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're not feeling like getting in a drawn-out statistical battle over sheep wool in the environment, then just go for the principal point.
Never.
How do we treat the animals and how do we take them through that process? But obviously, no, it's a valid point.
Take them through.
Okay, we'll take one more question from the audience, then we'll move on. Joe at the back.
So, presumably your argument for saying that killing a human is murder and killing an animal isn't, presumably resting on some kind of difference in properties between those two things, meaning that in one case the killing begets murder and the other the killing doesn't beget murder. I don't think it doesn't seem like you've quite outlined what exactly that difference is.
Hey, you must watch Isaac too, that guy.
I think we need to appreciate what murder is and what the law is and what these terms are. They are legislative properties which are imparted by a society encoding them into law.
Dodge alert, dodge alert. Yeah, so he asked what the difference is, and now he's just riffing about the word murder in society, right? Like, that's not an answer to the question.
No.
And so, in order for me to commit murder or to steal something, we need to have certain legal beliefs.
And this is why.
And as I
like in that one video I made,
I'm sure any HSPS student will tear me to pieces for it.
It's part of why in that one video I made where you were not answering the guy's question, the Nick Ferrari. I was like, it's important to answer the question, right? Because if you're the guy who always gives a clear answer, it is so easy to rip on the other guy when they're just dodging the point, right?
And you know what? I so appreciate that, because in this one, he asks me a loaded question and makes him wants a yes or no, and I seen what he was trying to do with it, but because of the last Nick Ferrari situation, I started to explain my point before answering his question. And then I corrected myself. It's coming up. And I actually answered his question clearly and then elaborated. Because when I answered, he goes, "Oh, really? Oh, really?"
Yeah.
And then I just like, "Oh, wait. Let me explain now."
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Is effectively the view of how society works, and that society is by participation, and with that, you receive certain protections. And so I would say for that reason, I can murder a human, but I cannot murder an animal. Because that sort of legal franchisement,
I think he did just do the rights responsibilities meme.
Is effectively the view of how society works, and that society is by participation, and with that, you receive certain protections.
Okay.
And so I'd say,
yeah, so that is basically the rights responsibilities meme. So that questioner earlier, who I was saying, I'm not sure if they were attacking his position legitimately. If he did say anything like that earlier before, then it was definitely a legitimate attack, because he seems to actually think that your rights derive from like participation in society or something like this, which presumably means, something close to responsibilities. Like, I mean, it's the reason why, regardless of whether you want to say rights derive from, participation in society, responsibility, whatever the exact meme is, it's like, the problem with that kind of thinking is we go to cases of people who they can't really contribute to society. They're not doing anything meaningful, right? Like if you take someone who's severely mentally disabled, it's like they can't respect your rights and have responsibilities and do these kind of things, but yet we don't think it's okay to kill that person, right? So if the sole determining factor of who's right to kill is whether they can uphold certain societal responsibilities, well, then you're going to be comfortable killing those people. Now, participation in society, that's a bit broader. You'd have to lay out what exactly constitutes participation, right? Like, I mean, maybe you could be philosophically annoying with that and try to broaden it out a bit, but the same general kind of critique is going to apply, right?
Agree.
Like you can do things like pretty much no matter what level of participation they want. You can just create an abstract where you just go, okay, well, let's say that we have the universe box from Rick and Morty, right? And there's this little box. In fact, it's slightly different from the Rick and Morty box because it doesn't power a car or anything. It's just a universe box. So the people living inside that universe, right? They can't have any impact on society because they're inside the box. And if there's sometimes people give really annoying sophistry here, they're like, oh, they can have an impact on each other. You're like, okay, fine. It's a bunch of individual universes of individual people, and everyone else in there is like a simulation or something, right? And you can just get to this scenario ultimately where it's like you've got a person, they have sentience, they have the capacity for well-being, but they can't participate, right? However participate is defined, you can create this kind of almost however it's defined. You can create this kind of abstract and create a situation where someone who obviously should have rights can't participate. And then, if you're saying rights derived from participation in society, you end up kind of skewered on that, just saying like, well, I guess you can like Holocaust the universe box.
Most people aren't going to go that far, though, are they? Like,
No, I'm talking about like 5 levels of sophistry past what he's doing right now. But like he's just saying something like, rights derived from responsibilities will then go to a human who's not responsible, or it derives from participation in society. Just talk about a human who's like just not living in society or something.
Like, what about a baby or something?
Sure. Well, yeah. I was just saying that like there's sophistry there where they can broaden out what they mean by participation, so then somehow the baby is still participating, but you can also adjust your hypothetical to calibrate for those things.
Yeah.
Right. Because if they're fundamentally, you can always find the reductio. If they're going to say that it's not sentience, it's not well-being, then you can find some kind of case where their criteria for rights is not satisfied, but the being is capable of sentience and well-being and all these things, and it seems crazy to say we can kill it.
Yeah. For that reason, I can murder a human, but I cannot murder an animal, because that sort of legal franchisement, that legal protection is not extended to animals, and the only way it could be is by granting them the sort of equality and the sort of recognition, which, as I proved, is actually very, very dangerous. And so if you do respect the right of humans and animals as different, and having different needs and different properties and different wants and so on and so forth.
Okay, so there's some main memes that are coming across. He uses different though a lot, and he does the radical equality straw man a lot, and he does a bit of the rights derived from responsibility stuff. We've been through the radical equality one. It's false that veganism implies radical equality. We've been through the rights responsibility stuff. Sorry, what was the one that he just delivered right there? Let me just go back a few seconds. Oh, different though, yeah. And with the different though thing, it's like, again, we've been through that too, right? There's differences in treatment between humans and animals. Some of them we find appropriate, like, not, it's appropriate to not romantically love a pig, but to romantically love a human. It's not appropriate to stab a pig and not stab a human, right? So just using this blanket term of difference to slide whatever differences of treatment you want under the table, right? Like that's not really a legitimate move.
Having different needs and different properties and different wants and so on and so forth, you cannot therefore classify it as murder.
Okay. Unfortunately, we'll have to move on. If you have any further questions, you can of course ask them at the end.
Joey,
that being said, I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Louise Harris, who's a third-year student here at FITS.
Okay, so is meat murder? The Oxford Dictionary definition, as Will has just said, is the unlawful, premeditated killing of one human being by another. Clearly, if we were to use this definition, meat wouldn't be murder, because meat, in the context of this debate, is the flesh of a non-human animal. But the question is, why is murder wrong? What is it about murder that's morally wrong? It's the deliberate and needless taking of a sentient being's life against its will. So, that will be the definition I use today, and I'll be showing you how meat fulfills every one of those categories. It's needless, it's the deliberate killing of a sentient being, and against their will. So, point 1. Meat is murder because non-human animals who are killed for their meat are sentient. Sentience is the capacity to feel, perceive, or experience subjectively. So that involves feeling pain, emotions, having awareness of your surroundings, and so on. There is consensus amongst scientists that non-human animals have
Can we just stop this for a sec?
In 2012, an international group of prominent scientists...
Okay. So we talked, me and this girl, she was quite nervous, but her and I talked before, we talked to make sure, okay, so what will my points be and what will your points be, so we didn't cross points?
Sure.
So I had 3, where one was, okay, so I wanted to bang out the semantics first, and then I wanted to talk about the Cambridge Declaration of Consciousness, because I was like, wow, Cambridge, shit, that's when they signed it. And then the last one was, the difference. They named the trait.
Sure.
And I was like, so she rang me. She's like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll just ring in to make sure we don't cross over points. And then, the opening part of her statement was one of the points that I was going to use. And I was like, oh, why did you do that? Yeah, and I was just like, that was, one of my main things. And I was like, it really didn't matter to me because we both are on the same team here, but I just thought it was funny because if you see me here, wait, watch me when I sit back and I'm like, well, what am I going to say now? And I was thinking, oh, God, I hope she hasn't written down all of what I'm gonna say, because then what am I gonna say? I just have to rehash what she said. But anyway,
I would say at the same time though, like I don't know if she's like a person who's done many debates before, but like it can be a bit flustering. Like maybe she wasn't supposed to say an exact thing, but then it like I don't know. I cut her some slack too, right?
Oh, 100%. No, I would never say anything. I just thought it was funny when you look at me, sit back and
because you're just a bit tripped out by it, basically. Yeah. I'd also say a slight problem with what she's doing. She should have just contested the definition, right? She shouldn't have tried to get to like the spirit of what murder is about, because you don't have to even do that. You could just say there's definitions that work for veganism, and just pull one from a dictionary, right? I think there's one in Oxford that's appropriate for veganism. If not, there's definitely one in Cambridge. And then the other problem is she used a word of vague obligation, which is necessary, needless. Yeah, sorry, my bad. And again, like if you're dealing with like philosophy noobs, it won't be that bad. But if it's someone who knows philosophy and wants to be a sophist and give you a hard time, they'll just get into things like, well, what exactly defines needlessness? And like, this is some like subjectively defined concept. And like, even if we agree on it, what exactly is your standard? How do you determine if an action is needless? And then trying to come up with all these like obnoxious counterexamples. And it's just that those kind of words, my opinion, is you should only use if you have a clear definition that you're going to put on the table, right? Like it's not even clear what it means. Like needless for food, needless for... So yeah, I personally am a hater on those words and on the vegan society definition generally. But yeah, okay, let's play it.
Signed the Cambridge, so right here, Declaration on Consciousness, in which they proclaim their support for the idea that animals are conscious and aware to the degree that humans are. The same degree.
Geez.
And that list of animals was
too,
all
right?
mammals, birds, and even the octopus.
Did you say your points were semantics,
and they also acknowledge that consciousness can emerge in animals which are actually very unlike humans, including those that evolve from different evolutionary tracks. So
like I'm sitting there, I'm a little bit...
neurological substrates that generate consciousness.
I didn't think she was going to do it, because that's the whole idea of her calling me.
Are conscious, they're sentient, just like us. Why does it mean... What's the difference between taking their life and taking our life? As you said, you wanted to separate animal sentience from this discussion, but if a human wasn't sentient, then would we consider it murder? Sentience is kind of key to this,
did he say that?
Debate. So some examples of sentience for non...
Did he say that he wanted to separate... I remember him saying he wanted to separate out some questions. Just planting a flag, I don't remember if animal sentience was.
I can't remember.
Okay.
Human.
Yeah, that's the thing with doing these kind of analyses on the fly. It's like, if you want to be really technical about like what people are saying and exactly what you agree with, it's hard without being able to reference back to what someone said before. So
yeah.
Farm animals who are killed for their meat. So sheep can recognize up to 50 other sheep's faces, remember it for 2 years. Cows show excitement when they discover how to open a gate leading to a food reward. Lame meat chickens choose to eat food which contains a painkiller. They feel pain, emotions perceive, and are aware. They experience subjectively. And it can be argued, so it's not just murder, meat, taking the life of a sentient being, but it's worse, because the meat industry is a lifelong suffering for these animals. And that's because, generally, factory farming accounts for the vast majority of global meat production. For example, just in the US, factory farms raise 99.9% of chickens for meat. So in factory farms, these animals are confined in tiny enclosures or cages. Chickens, for example, have less than an A4 page amount of space. They can't move. They're pumped with hormones and antibiotics. Chickens have their beaks trimmed without anaesthetic at day 1 of age. Many attack each other or eat each other due to the stress of being kept in confined conditions. And even the process of slaughter can involve suffering. So, for example, gas chambers. These are in the UK, Australia, multiple countries. Footage shows pigs screaming and thrashing as they gasp for air inside the gas chambers in an Australian, the biggest pig abattoir in Australia. That was video footage. And constantly, people who go into factory farms to film the slaughtering process have found that actually the law, which you say is so important, has been broken in so many cases. Animals are being kicked, slapped, stamped on, improperly stunned, and many of them actually aren't sufficiently stunned so they are conscious when they are killed. So, as you say, they will be hacked in the throat whilst they're conscious. So it's not just murder, it's not just death, but it's also lifelong suffering, and because they are sentient, it means it's wrong.
Yeah, it's a holocaust. It's not just murder.
Point two. So even if the animal, let's say,
Exactly,
is stunned sufficiently, so they're unconscious when they're killed, the idea that this is somehow humane is ludicrous. What's humane about ending a sentient being's life against their will when they want to survive? Do they not have a right to life? Well, let's take a dog. We love dogs. Who here has liked the Facebook page Dog Spotting? Raise your hands if you have. Okay.
No one did.
I wouldn't bank on
So was
that.
it one person or?
Okay. So even a small number of people, there's still a difference. Why is there a difference? That's because how we view them. Cows and pigs and sheep, then maybe not as cute or fluffy. They're not publicised in the media as being funny or smart because we are conditioned to believe they're products, not individuals with identities. But research shows, again, they're not just as sentient. Pigs are smarter than 3-year-old humans. They can play video games. They're just as smart as your cat or dog. But they taste good. Let's say your dead dog tastes like chicken. Would you eat it? Probably not, right? People in the UK will sign petitions against the dog meat trade in China. But research reveals that one of the reasons is because we see pets to have complex minds like us. And once we are made aware through education that farm animals have these complex minds, have sentience, then what is the difference? Why is killing a dog murder?
So she actually used like all of your points basically. Now to be fair, like I think she's doing a good job. Like she's laid out a nice clear case, doing fine. But that is funny because she literally hit all 3 points that you were talking about: the definition, the semantics. Then name the trait was the third one, and then what was the middle one?
The Cambridge
yeah.
Declaration. But it was cute because she's like, oh well, like the guys who run the debate. Look, I think you should talk to your partner to make sure that you don't run over the same things. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, so here's my points. Boom, 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 and we had like an hour discussion.
Sure.
But she was quite nervous, and I totally understand that. And I was like, well, I'm speaking last.
Yeah.
Like it'd be good if I was speaking first, but like. Because I would have loved to go straight after Will, just to get all off the table, boom, 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 boom. But it really doesn't. It really didn't matter too much to me. It's okay.
Well, yeah, and I can see she has her stuff typed up also, so there wasn't really any option for her to adjust, probably, right? Because she came in like if you guys wanted to coordinate, so you're not saying any of the same stuff. If she was coming in with her stuff typed, like it would have had to been done beforehand anyway, right? But no, it's good you got a good debate partner because she's being nice and coherent and clear, and she's making good points about animal sentient. I don't remember her category. She was like splitting it up into point 1 and 2, but she made good points about animal sentience. She also is doing a good job of just laying out like what exactly is the difference, like why do we care about this moral wrong in one context but not the other, and then. Yeah, so she's saying lots of good stuff.
In Western society, and why is killing a farm animal not murder? So I don't see the difference there. Okay, point 3, meat is murder because the killing of animals for meat is needless in most of current society. So if, some people try and compare our meat consumption to a lion hunting, there's, not just one difference there, but one main one is that a lion's body is designed for meat. They're a carnivore. They don't have digestive systems to digest plant food, but we do. If they don't hunt that meat for survival, they will die. We will not. In our case, it's not a matter of whether we need meat. It's more greed. We do it because it tastes good. It's traditional culture. I'm not saying that everyone in the world, in every situation, it is murder. If there's someone in a rural village in a third world country, they have the only food source available to them is meat, or that's their only way to survive, then can you see it as needless? So, but when we're
depends on the definition
of meat in our society, the majority of meat consumption is by first world countries, and we simply just do not need meat to survive. It's a luxury. If we wouldn't support ivory trade or trophy hunting, which are fun activities or luxury products, why would we support the meat trade? And finally, you made the point that clearly murder is to do with humans, and meat isn't just the murder of farm animals, but also humans. This is because the meat industry can be seen to perpetuate world hunger. So recent studies have shown that we already grow enough edible crops to feed not only the current human population, but the one projected for 2050. But that requires us to go vegan. That's because the plants that we're growing are going, 34% of those are going to animals. They could be going to humans, and they wouldn't be starving and dying. So it's murder for us as well. Thank you.
And I'm just thinking, what am I going to say now?
Okay, so firstly, any
Yeah,
questions?
I could say a few things about that, but whatever. Good overall.
Yeah,
from the
though.
audience?
No, it was good, yeah.
There, just the hand at the back there.
Yeah, I would just like to ask, if you are opposed to the killing of sentient creatures when it's not necessary, for example, to save someone's life, what's your opinion on abortion when the woman's life is not in danger?
A
Irrelevant.
woman's life is not in danger.
Yeah.
Okay, but I see the similarities you're making because it's the taking of a life of a sentient being. But here it's a lot more complex issue. If that woman, if that woman isn't ready to have a child or can't, there's a lot of complex issues there.
Okay.
It's interfering with her own well-being, and whereas whether you're eating meat or not is not going to interfere with your life in any actually tangible manner. So it's clearly needless.
You still need justification to rob the sentience from the baby in your stomach.
Right.
You need a justification for it. Otherwise it is murder. Otherwise there's we'd contradict our own moral system if we didn't agree that robbing the sentience from the baby in our stomach was murder, without a very significant justification to take the life of that baby.
Sure. Right, exactly. I mean, it's just, look, the abortion thing is it's a bit of a side issue, but vegans should be consistent about it, right?
Yeah.
So, when a pregnancy starts, you've just got a bunch of, cells, right? It's that's not sentient, that doesn't matter. I don't think the potential argument is convincing. And the reason for that is, look, if we picture this, we have high technology and we can build sentient robots, right? So when exactly... But does inanimate matter then just have this potential that the cells have, or does it gain that potential once someone intends to use that inanimate steel and silicon to make a sentient robot? Do just these beams of steel now carry moral worth? The whole potential thing seems weird. So my position is there's definitely not value when the thing's not sentient, because I'm again not persuaded by the potential arguments. And then when the thing, if we go to the end of the pregnancy, for example, I don't know anyone who wouldn't agree that it's murder, right? Society agrees that it's murder. That's why late-term abortion isn't legal, right? Pretty much everyone understands that there's something deeply morally wrong about killing a fully formed human baby, unless there's maybe some kind of threat to the woman's life that's severe, if there's a serious problem. So, look, we can tell that we're dealing with a spectrum if you're on board with those 2 points, where it's okay over here and it's bad over here, and presumably it gets worse by degree as the thing gains sentience. And the exact crossover threshold where it's its sentience matters sufficiently enough that the woman's petty interests or whatever wouldn't justify killing it, that would be something we could debate about. But vegans should be clear that there is a big area where it's just obviously immoral.
Yeah. And do you even entertain this in a meat is murder debate? I'd be this is not... It doesn't tell you whether or not meat is murder, but it would tell you whether or not you contradict yourself. Whether or not you have a double standard there, would you say that this is an important thing to answer?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Would I say it's an important thing to answer? Okay. I also want to correct something I said, because I said the woman's petty interest, and I think that people are going to read that the wrong way. What I mean is just that the woman, she could have a very significant interest, not being harmed, right? That's, everyone would agree that's pretty serious, and then she could have some kind of more a less serious interest than that, right? Some other reason for not wanting to have the child. So if something is like microscopically sentient, it might not even outweigh like a petty interest, right? So it's like there is just an interesting problem about just how much the being matters at different levels. But we should be clear it matters once it's significantly sentient. And then you asked me, do I think it's important to go down that road? Well, it depends how they phrase the question. Like, I mean, it's all about context, man. Like, this is a context where they can ask you things, so it seems like it would be pretty inappropriate to not answer. Like, if you were running an argument, if you were, like, running Name the Trade on someone and they were trying to derail you by asking about abortion, it would be fine to ignore it. But, yeah, I don't see a basis for dismissing the question as, like not remotely relevant, right? Because
I guess,
it
like,
doesn't seem like it would makes sense for your position on abortion to be completely divorced from your position on veganism. Like,
because it comes down to sentience and justification, abortion, and so does whether or not killing animals is justified. Like, so with killing animals, obviously there's justified killing of animals and unjustified killing of animals, and sentience comes into that as well. So with justified killing of animals in, like, crop deaths for, industry deaths and stuff like that. So with the abortion thing, it kind of does cross over into your moral system there. So it kind of like they could expose a big double standard in a vegan's moral system if they got one standard for aborted babies and another standard for animals.
Yeah, and they can't name the trait. Yeah.
So,
well, I guess that here's the thing is, like, you want to ask, like, you don't want to just vaguely think about, like, is this relevant? Like, you want to have a technical way of determining if it's relevant, right? And it seems to me like the kind of things that are irrelevant to veganism are things that a vegan could either hold or not hold, and it wouldn't have any impact, like, on their veganism. So, for example, like, believing in the flat earth, right? Like, a vegan could either believe the earth is flat or not believe the earth is flat, and their belief there, it's not clear how it would link at all to their belief on veganism, so it seems kind of like irrelevant, right? And it's not obvious to me that's the case with abortion. I mean, it seems like it's a pretty, like, it's a similar issue of rights, so I don't see a clear basis for dismissing it as irrelevant. It seems like probably you should answer that. Yeah. And for me, also, I'd point out, if I'm ever skeptical about whether it needs answering, then I'll just answer it, because you don't want to accidentally plant your feet in the mud on something and then later reflect on it and be like, fuck, it was relevant. Like, it's better to err on the side of accidentally answering an irrelevant question than it's better to answer an irrelevant question than not to answer a relevant question. So if you're going to commit an error in one of those two directions, it's better to do it in the direction of answering an irrelevant question.
Yeah, because, at the time I was, like, thinking to her, like, well, what's abortion got to do with whether or not meat is murder? And it's got a lot to do with it. It's got a lot to do with it. Like, when you think about it, like, in that context, like, if we're saying, like, if we're defending the fact that, killing an animal is murder, and all of a sudden they whip out, well, what do you think of abortion? And we go, well, no, it's always okay because the woman matters more.
Well,
They'd be like, wait. So it does matter in this debate, I think.
Like, I guess, though, see, I don't know. I'd have to think about this, because someone could be like, look, I just hold this, like, deontological belief about certain types of killing, and it's not about the consequences for sentient beings. And, like, I just believe that the way we're killing animals and the animal holocaust just falls into the unacceptable category, and the way that babies are killed, for some reason doesn't. Like, you might be able to make some non-consequential separation there and then still hold down your position as a vegan. But when you're talking about how important sentience is, then it seems like that's not really a road you can take, because you're obviously at least somewhat, concerned with consequences, presumably, if you're talking about, like, the damage done to sentient beings. So, yeah, I mean, there might be certain frames that could dismiss it while staying vegan, but I wouldn't feel safe dismissing that. I'd probably just address that.
Yeah.
I'm just slightly curious as to the way you're addressing murder, because you said that if there was a villager in an underdeveloped country who ate meat, that wouldn't be murder, and that murder is apparently now defined as needless waste. Surely that firstly doesn't accord with the definition you gave at the beginning, and secondly is just you saying this is murder.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the problem there, right? So, yeah. So first of all, he said murder, which apparently means blah blah blah, right? This is the problem with her not just referencing another dictionary. She should have just said, you're cherry picking a specific definition. There are definitions that it works by. Here's the definition that I'm using, right? Yeah, and then the other problem is with this whole, like, it's okay if it's some tribe somewhere. Like, I don't know that that's the case, right? Like, do you think that it's ethical for some tribe somewhere to murder humans if that's like an accessible food source? Like, I think those people would actually have a moral obligation to move, right? Like, so you don't want to get reverse named traded by something like this.
And therefore I'm going to classify needless waste, but not an underdeveloped nation's village consuming meat as murder, because if you want to be logically consistent, shouldn't you say that all meat consumption is therefore murder, because animals should therefore be equal?
Well, my definition is that it is, like, meat is murder because it is needless, right? So, like, to me, if two people on humans are on a...
She's opening herself up for a really bad attack here, because he can... I don't know if he's going to notice it, but he can just say, like, okay, well, what if they were killing a human in the exact same situation? Then presumably it meets your criteria for not being murder, right? Can these people just murder each other and eat each other?
We get into that, bro. Don't you worry.
Yeah, so that's part of... She opened herself up a bit to that.
A desert island. And in order for one of them to survive, they have to kill the other. To me, that just isn't murder, because it's like, it's not, they're doing it out of a need to survive. You might
look,
find that
I understand vegans like to say things like, oh yeah, if it's a survival situation, it's a survival situation. That's a problematic view, right? Like, look, Joey, if I'm on an island with you, I am not going to murder you to survive. I don't think it's ethical for me to just murder you to survive, right? I think that's deeply wrong. I mean, we could agree if we were rational beings, we might be like, look, we're not going to make it. One of us has to just die so the other can eat and live. Like, let's pull straws for it or something. But, like, I wouldn't think that it's okay to to just, like, assassinate you, right? So
we actually get into this, dude. It's excellent. It's great. Exactly what you're saying now. We bang this out.
Yeah. Now this, I think you can actually dismiss as irrelevant, though, because you can say, like, look, you might hold a definition of veganism that covers these island situations where it's necessary for living, or you might not, right? And you could still say that it's wrong in the context of just murdering for like in the way we do in the factory farm, right? So you could say, like, look, you could be a vegan and set your threshold such that this position falls within it or not. It's a bit easier to dismiss than something like the question about abortion. I'll play it though.
I've got a different view on that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's... I think there's more of a reason, but I don't think it's morally justified. If you and I were on a desert island and I killed you to survive, I didn't need to do that. I mean, we're both as sentient as each other, and we both have, I think that's still murder, personally. And I don't think that I don't think it's always murder for me. I think it's to be consistent across the board. Animal products in third world countries are a luxury. So to say, like, rice is less accessible than, a sheep, maybe some hunting scenario, but for me, it's not moral. They might have more of a reason, more of a justification there than you do over here, but yeah.
Okay, any further questions before we move on?
I'm a bit confused. Did they just let... Okay, I might be misperceiving things here, but did they just let him ask her a question, but they didn't let you ask him a question?
Yeah, so what happened is he asked her a question, and then she tried to answer it and said, well, Joey's probably got a different, he's probably got a different position on that. So then they let me jump in there. They sort of bent the rules there a little bit and allowed me to speak.
I've already forgotten. Was the question posed to her by the other side on the panel, or was it by one of the audience members?
No, it was the pink shirt guy, Will. He said he sort of questioned her definition on murder and her saying that, you know, if it's a tribe that need to do it to survive, it's not murder.
Okay, so I might be I'm not confident I'm perceiving this right. I'd have to like watch it over to make sure, but I think that might be an instance of unfair modding, right? Because they didn't let you ask the other panelists questions, right? And they did let him ask her a question. So that seems a little weird.
They let me ask him, Will, a question, right? I asked him, what's the moral difference between stabbing a goat and a baby? But when he answered with a question, and I wanted to say, well, you didn't answer my question, they didn't let me, they just cut me off.
Oh, okay.
I was like, you didn't answer, and they like cut me off. No, you have your time afterwards to debate.
So maybe they, like, this is why I was a little cautious to say anything strong. I might have misperceived it. So they allow like one response, but not for it to...
A question, but not a cross-examination and back and forth.
Okay, yep, okay, never mind. That seems fair then.
Yeah.
When we kill, for example, sheep or, well, cattle, but what's your take on insects, for example? If we eat an insect, is that murder? Is that meat?
So scientific research on sentience is consensus about the sentience of like mammals and birds. As far as I'm aware, like the research on insects is inconclusive. But I mean, in my view, it's always best to give like the benefit of the doubt. If you don't know if something's sentient, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
You know, you should prioritize trying to avoid eating what's kind of most sentient.
I mean, what's good is the layout of her answer. She didn't actually give a yes or a no. But like the way she's like trying to respond of like, we're not sure how sentient they are, give the benefit of the doubt. That's like the right like kind of thinking about the question.
That's is sentient.
Okay.
And and if we want to answer that, yes, it would be murder. If we're talking about killing wantonly, right? That is something that it seems you could apply to a bug.
The second speaker for the opposition, Patrick Nutton, third-year student here at FITS and also president of the Debating Society.
President, is he going to lay down some dank logic?
I'm just going to the toilet quickly. I'll be back in 5 minutes. 2 minutes.
It's a pleasure to be here today. Okay. Honestly, to see so many of you here at an event, yeah, it's great. And I'd like to thank everyone who's made tonight possible. Now, in all honesty, my position in this debate is far closer to Joey and Louise than it is to my partner, and I hope that he has appealed to those of you in this room who share his views, but I do not. I think that the meat industry, as it is murderous.
Okay, so...
And I agree with everything that Louise...
We probably know where this is going. This is very likely in the direction of, like, lip service to factory farming being wrong, but, you know, ethical farming, though. That's my guess. We'll see where it winds up.
Has said on the horrors of the meat industry as she has called out battery farming, etc. But my speech is not here to argue with that. I'm going to be explaining how meat and the direction it is going actually is moving from being murderous to not murderous and is the way to move forward into a future where meat isn't murder. The most effective way to do that is to vote that meat isn't murder. And that's for one very simple reason. We live in an age of developing technology where cultured meat is becoming cheaper and more productive by the year. The first cultured hamburger was produced in 2013. And over the last few years, it has become a cheaper and more available food source. It is still a luxury product, but if the history has taught us anything, it is that technologies get cheaper, they get faster, they get more effective. So, let me be clear. The meat industry as it is murderous. But the future of meat and the direction it is going disconnects the product of meat from an act where you must kill a being. This is a huge disconnect in the argument, where the meat industry as it is now is murderous, but the future of meat is not. Now, there are plenty of you here who are very aware of the horrors of the meat industry. I'm sure that the opening...
Okay, so already, so I bet on what he was going to do, which was factory farming, wrong, virtue signal, lip service, then but ethical farming though. So I was wrong. It was factory farming, wrong, virtue signal, lip service, then ethical lab meat though, not ethical farming though. And obviously the problem is just like, I think that it would be pretty fair to just call this equivocation. So for anyone who doesn't know, equivocating, that is using the same term to mean two different things. So it's pretty obvious that when we're talking about meat here, we're talking about meat that involves the murder of an animal. Or I don't want to embed the proposition in my definition. We're talking about meat that involves stabbing an animal in the throat or something roughly like that, right? It's pretty obvious we're not talking about lab meat. So I think that sort of equivocating to lab meat and then asking for people to reject the debate prop based on something that was kind of obvious none of us are talking about, I think that's a bit of a slimy argument.
Agree.
Vote has made that very clear alongside the arguments of Louise and Joey. But there are plenty more who are not at this debate. And people like my partner who will never be convinced by the argument of go vegan, who will retain eating meat to the day they die out of stubbornness. I'm sure those of you who are involved in vegan organizations are aware of these people and have come across them, right? What is the way to win them over? What is the way to convince those people to stop murdering animals? It is to transform meat itself. It is to change the underpinnings of their debate and to move meat away from when it is murderous to when it is not, through changing technology and a transforming world. Therefore, I urge you that when you leave here tonight, you argue that meat is not murder, not just because, you know, meat tastes nice or they're not really human or battery farming doesn't matter because, you know, they're chickens or whatever.
He knows the anti-vegan memes.
Argue that meat isn't murder because of a changing world which disconnects meat from the killing of a sentient being, and that means that we can convince those who are never going to stop eating meat.
Okay, so let me just show the problem with this. So this would be like saying that fucking a woman without her consent isn't rape because we're coming out with sex robots, right? So it's just an equivocation. It's like we're not like when we're talking about rape, we're obviously not talking about the sex robot. When we're talking about meat, we're obviously not talking about lab meat. Okay, no one's going to contest what you're saying, and this is part of the problem that I point out with the proposition initially before we even got into this, because I saw this sophistry pathway the second I saw that debate proposition. But yeah, I mean, unless you find an argument like that palatable, you know, to fucking a woman without her consent, that's not rape because, you know, sex robots are coming out. So, you know, it's possible to ethically rape a sex robot. It's like, unless you're persuaded by that, I don't think you should find what he's saying here persuasive.
That they do not have to kill to get their fix. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Why are you happy and clapping?
Okay, any questions? Right, we'll go with the gentleman at the back.
Firstly, I'm just wondering what exactly is the definition?
So meat is using regenerative in the sort of the lab growth is using regenerative techniques similar to stem cell research to grow exactly the same compounds as you would get in a live animal in a lab.
He asked him what the definition of meat is. How do you define meat?
The process of vertical farming.
Yeah, so he's just riffing on what lab meat is, right?
He said, what do you mean by, what is your definition of meat? And then he starts going on about lab meat definition. And I'm like, what dictionary are you referencing here?
Now, I zoned out because I read the comments, but that is the perfect thing to ask, right? When someone equivocates, the best response is just asking them to define the term, right? Because
you know what happened?
No, I don't.
My mate who was on the camera was in the Cambridge Dictionary looking up the definition of meat, and it said the flesh of an animal.
Mm. But at the same time, like, it is the flesh of an animal even when it's grown in a lab, though.
True. Let's look at, maybe we can look it up right now, the Cambridge Dictionary definition.
Yeah, because when you hear animal, it's like, yeah, that's what we're talking about. But then it's like, well, wait, no, the lab meat is still animal flesh, though.
Yeah, true.
Which, like, again, this is why, like, the proposition is not good, because they can actually do this, and technically it's fair, but it's just kind of slimy because everyone knows we're not talking about, like, the obviously ethically unproblematic notion of lab meat. We're obviously talking about stabbing animals.
The flesh of an animal when it's used for food.
Yeah.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah. We thought we had a gotcha, but we didn't quite.
Wait a second. Like, my mate Chris thought he had a gotcha. Chris, where's Chris? Chris Hines. He thought he had a gotcha. He's like, oh my God, look at this. But really, like, yeah, that was really simple. You're like, well, it technically is meat, whether it's lab grown or not. It's the cells of a, yeah, it is flesh.
So Chris's comeback might have been suboptimal, but if the guy in the audience said, what's your definition of meat, that's perfect, right? Because we don't even need to propose a definition. He's obviously using meat to mean two different things, right? He's using it simultaneously to talk about the lab meat and the meat that comes from the animal holocaust. Now,
yeah,
look, you can define meat in such a way that it covers both of those things, right? So you might say it's weird, I guess, when we talk about whether it's equivocation. It's possible to not equivocate while doing that, right? Like you're technically talking about two things that are both meat. So I guess the sense in which I'm calling it equivocation is just that you have two obviously different things that even if they both fit under this word, it's like maybe we should use a word that's not like an umbrella that captures both of them, right? So I guess technically it's not fair to call it equivocation if meat covers both terms, but it's whatever kind of weirdness it is, it's kind of like equivocation because it's like there are two distinct things here, even if they fall under the same umbrella term, and we obviously are talking about this one and not this one. So we wish that you would be clear, but yeah, it's a problem with the debate proposition.
In that you grow in a lab or in a factory using scientific methods a product that does not involve a live animal which is ever sentient.
This guy could have actually just answered the question way easier. He could have just said, "Oh, it's the flesh of an animal."
I know.
Right?
It starts going into like biology class.
Yeah.
So I think that falls quite clearly under the definition of meat. Do you agree?
About animal-based cells.
Sorry, it's one at a time. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and he will call you one by one.
Okay, we'll go with the lady at the back.
How many people here have had killed or cultured meat? Because as far as I'm aware, like the most of the meat here is all animal slaughter.
Yes.
So I agree.
Yeah.
We are moving forward.
Yeah. So this is all stupid. This is all because of the debate proposition. So I'm glad I complained about it right off the bat because this was definitely coming. Yeah. So the problem is that again, it's just the word meat can cover both of these categories, but the one we're saying is unethical is this category. We're not saying the one over here is unethical as well. So what this debate needs is some term other than meat or meat specifically defined so that it refers to what we're talking about, which is the animal holocaust, and doesn't allow for also covering this other thing that none of us have a problem with, which is lab meat. So, I mean, even just changing the proposition from meat is murder to killing animals for meat is murder would stop him from being able to use that move, right? Because then lab meat, you're not killing, that's not a case of killing animals for meat, right? So you can just dismiss that. You can just say, well, no, that's not what we're talking about. It's not the proposition. But because of the proposition here, technically it is the proposition.
Yes.
Murder.
Okay.
I was just curious if, like, maybe you yourself have had.
I've not, but it is growing, and it's one of those kind of weird, trendy, niche restaurant things. But what I would say is a reason that I would agree with you that the majority of meat as it is now is murder. But let's not sell the principle, because once we sell the principle, it's much harder to convince the people who are never going to convert, right? I'd say that if you want, let's
manipulation
keep
tactic
the debate
there.
open. Let's say that meat isn't murder when there is a technology which we can pursue to win over meat eaters to a product which doesn't harm
He's not even a vegan. He's like...
Does that sound like a fair response
Yeah,
to you?
it's pretty weird. Because the thing is, like, he's agreeing that meat is...
what we can do right now,
sorry,
and
it's the
what
pause
is
function.
happening right
He's agreeing that the meat from factory farms is murder, but apparently, like, he's a meat eater, right? Like, doesn't he buy that
Yeah.
meat? So it's like, you're...
Yeah.
Even if you're going to say, like, technically meat itself isn't murder and just factory farmed meat or, like, meat from the industry is murder or whatever, it's like, okay, but then even with your separation in place, what you're doing is still murder.
And he's given us like sort of advice on how to convert people, and it's just like, dude, like, what's up?
Well, yeah, and the thing is, like it's kind of dumb because it's like, look, it's not a dichotomous choice, right, between saying all meat is murder or no meat is murder. Just be clear about what you mean by meat, right? So that it's like trying to say, like, no, we need to, like, you know, preserve the term. It's like, well, or we could just be clear about what we're talking about, right? Like, if you're clear, then it's not this dichotomous choice between all meat is murder or not all meat is murder. Or all meat is not murder, sorry.
right now are different. So cultured meat exists, and it separates the principles of meat being murder versus the majority of what is happening. So there are clear examples in the world today where meat isn't murder. So the principle is kind of hard to sell. And I would say that if you sell that meat is murder as a principle today, it becomes much harder to convince people who are never going to move off meat to move on to the alternative. So of meat which is grown in labs. Thank you.
Can we take two more questions? There's the lady at the back. Yep.
Well, earlier I kind of got the impression that the fact that killing the animal was part of it, in the sense that you, the guy in the pink shirt, was saying how it's kind of like a assertion of human superiority. And I wonder how you would feel about lab-grown meat, knowing that it's not asserting that authority anymore. Is that putting animals equal to humans? How do you feel about that? Because I don't think lab-grown meat would satisfy all meat eaters, because, as you were saying before, it's the fact that you seem to want to feel superior to animals.
This is more a question for you than it is for me.
Shall I? Am I right?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, sure. So a few things there. The first, with regards to human superiority in that point, it's less a want to feel superior. It's more, I would argue, a social necessity, purely due to the implications that arise when we start judging animals to be completely equal. I mean, as I said, if we want to have a logically coherent society, we would have to grant them rights, which, with the example of a baby, shows we just can't feasibly do. So it's less about want. And with regards to
that point really is like just systematically false, right? Like, I laid it out before, but you can just frame that like a disjunctive syllogism, right? You can just say either either meat is not murder, or we believe in radical equality. We don't believe in radical equality, therefore meat is not murder, right? It's like, you could make a deductively valid argument out of that, but it's just the problem is that first premise, right? It's not a dichotomous choice. It's not actually the case that either meat is not murder or we believe in radical equality, right? You can believe that meat is murder without believing in radical equality. So that argument is just systematically flawed.
Lab-grown meat, I'd much prefer the real thing myself. I've never had lab-grown meat. So the way that sort of satisfies the whole superiority discussion, I'm slightly confused to thrust the question there. But what I would say is that to declare it as murder, taking into account the points about lab-grown meat, is effectively not only a baseless rejection of meat if you do have hope for lab-grown meat in the future, as has been said, but also, linking back to the early point, quite a dangerous approach to take if we are to have a society in which humans can flourish and animals can be treated as separate beings but with their own rights in turn.
Okay, we'll have one more question and then we'll move on to Joe. The gentleman in the hat.
Thank you, the gentleman on my far right. Are you not asking us to answer two questions in one vote-taking? There's the question of whether animal-based meat is murder versus culture-based meat.
I mean, the question.
Yeah. See,
Yes.
everyone's catching it. Did you just say something, Joey?
No.
Okay.
I didn't say anything.
Yeah, everyone's catching it, right? Because it's like, fuck, the air in this place. He needs to get a humidifier in here. Yeah, it's like everyone's catching this equivocation. And again, I don't want to technically call it equivocation because it's like, yes, it's using the same term to mean two things, but that term actually does cover both of those things. But it's still just the problem is the umbrella term. If we're not going to call it equivocation, we're going to say the problem is the umbrella term. And that's like generally what people are complaining about here with his argument. So it's definitely getting seen through.
Yeah, I think if the debate was is animal meat murder, I wouldn't be on this side of the argument, right?
That's
a
good
saying,
concession.
Let's not sell the principle.
Although,
because this question has to.
Nah, it is though.
well,
But
yeah,
because
of what we just described, right? Yeah, it's like
the killing of the animal for me is like that would be the better, more waterproof proposition, I think.
Correct. Yep. 100%.
Even unjustified killing of an animal for me, because would roadkill be murder? Like
that, but then you add a further hurdle of having to explain what you mean by justification. But you can basically well, you can get yourself around a lot of that hurdle by just saying, look, I'm not going to precisely define what justification is. I'm just going to point to a case in the human context where we all agree there's not justification and ask you to differentiate it. So you can work with that actually, but it's still there's still a bit of a burden when you throw the word justify in to the prop.
Yeah.
It has to include the potential for a future when as this technology takes off and becomes more mainstream, people are able to eat more widely available a meat that clearly isn't murderous. So I think that's a really good point. What I would say is don't go out of this room and don't vote against the principle of meat. Cast your vote against the current state of the meat industry and its abominable practices. So they are two different questions. No, it wouldn't. Because it would mean, because if you do that, you vote that meat is murder. You would be cutting off an option which allows the future of meat to be separate from murder.
No, because I'm voting that animal-based meat is murder.
But that's not the question in front of us, is it?
Sorry.
So this is like a really just like it's a stupid point, right? So his whole thing is just winning on a technicality, right? It's like, well, there's lab meat. I mean, is that murder? No. Okay, meat's not murder. It's like that's fair. It's fair, and I agree. But you're only able to win on that technicality because of the way that the proposition is framed.
One more question, and then we have to move on after that.
I mean, there was a distinction with oat milk and plant-based milks, not to be called milks, and cheese.
And I'll point out also, you can do the same thing with those other words like necessity as you can do with justified, right? You can one of the ways to use those words without getting yourself trapped is to just say, look, I'm not putting forth a definition. I'm just going to go from a case where it's clearly not necessary or justified or whatever in the human context and ask you to break the analogy. So I just want to be clear, you can do that with terms like necessary, similar to how you can with justified.
And yogurts, because the dairy industry in the US and Europe said milk has to come from an animal. And I have a feeling that you're optimistic that cellular-based lab meat will have the same right because it comes from animal genes, but you don't know. The industry may say, they may see it as a threat to their market and their industry, and want it differentiated and then class it not as meat. So
this is not an interesting criticism. So just saying there might be legal hurdles to like lab meat getting implemented, it's like, no, it's not addressing the fundamental thing he's saying, right? Like, this is the criticism that is appropriate here, is, yes, okay, if we agree that lab meat is not murder and that lab meat is meat, well, then we've got a case of meat not being murder. So it's not fair to say that meat is murder categorically, right? That's a fair point. You could lay that out in a logically valid way and it would work. So the problem there is actually not so much with his position. I mean, I'm going to just say this one more time because I think I've hammered the point home enough. It's with the debate proposition, right? So the criticism that you should be levying at this guy is basically like something along the lines of like, yes, you're right on a technicality, but that's a Weasley move, and it's only possible because of the debate proposition.
I think you are.
So,
it could be class.
okay, let's see what the future holds, and what classifications fall into place as the tech grows. But at the moment, lab-grown meat is meat. It occupies the exact same cellular structure. It has been able to replicate tastes. It has exactly the same kind of, resting principles. What differentiates it is cost and production.
And lack of consciousness.
Yes, and lack of consciousness, which is exactly why you should vote that meat isn't murder, because it's that key separating degree. So this is a meat, which results in people, in beings not being murdered. So doesn't that prove the point?
It does.
Okay, we're going to have to move on. And finally, I'd like to introduce our fourth speaker, Joey Carbstrong, vegan activist. We give him a round of applause, please. Thank you.
Yeah, Joey.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for your interesting positions and ideas.
Interesting.
So the first thing we've got to get off the table is the word murder, because really this is a play on words, isn't it? Like the word murder bears weight, and Will over here said that the most used definition, but not the only definition, is the unlawful premeditated killing of one human by another. Don't you worry, I hear it all the time. Probably hear it 5 times a week by people defending their meat eating. But that's not the only definition. So if you're going to go into the dictionary to use definitions of words, there are many non-anthropocentric definitions of the word murder.
Yeah, right there.
So, Collins...
That was a good point. That was a great opening. You just basically said, you're cherry picking, I can do the exact same thing. It doesn't get you anywhere. That's really good.
Dictionary has to kill brutally, to kill inhumanely or barbarously, and you could we can't deny that robbing someone of their sentience can never be humane. I mean, unless they are suffering, or we make them suffer, and then we rob them of their sentience, or we keep them in these happy farms and then we rob them of their sentience. So I think that fits perfectly what we do to animals. Merriam-Webster dictionary, to slaughter wantonly. So these definitions are all up there online. These all apply to animals. So just based on semantics alone, based on the definition alone, meat is murder. Meat, a product of murder. Now, I get into these semantics battles a lot.
Yep, it's good.
Is artificially inseminating a cow rape? Is, subjugating sentient animals slavery? Is shooting an animal in the head without moral justification
also,
murder?
A point here. Everyone can probably, a lot of people watching this can probably notice Joey is just coming off like significantly more charismatic than the other debate people. I think it's fair to say a big part of that is because you're not reading off a script. I mean, you're literally just expressing whatever you're honestly thinking and feeling, right? Like that's always going to come off more human. There's nothing wrong with reading off a script, but if you're in a debate setting and you want people to resonate with you, talking like this is actually better than coming in with something super prepared where you're reading like a robot. Easier to lose people like that. No, it's good, yeah.
Thank you.
I think there's a significant moral difference between animals and human beings. Now you might say, well, that justifies us, killing them against their will for an unnecessary reason and an unjustified reason. So you might say, well, we are superior. We're obviously more intelligent. Animals don't have iPhones. And I'm like, they can't. They can't.
You did.
What did I miss? Let me go back. Sorry, I was just thinking about were all the other people reading off something, which I don't know if they all were. It might have just been the girl. I don't remember. But either way, the main point I'm making is just you'll come off more charismatic if you're kind of free balling. Let me go back a sec here.
Yeah, you missed something.
Difference.
A word.
Between animals and human beings. Now you might say, well, that justifies us, killing them against their will for an unnecessary reason and an unjustified reason. So you might say, well, we are superior. We're obviously more intelligent. Animals don't have iPhones. And I'm like,
It does. It's kind of, you kind of get the same problem with all those words though, of just unnecessary, unjustified. They all just embed this like problem of like how are you defining those things? But I catch the correction there.
I went from unnecessary to unjustified. I feel like unjustified is stronger.
Unjustified, is it stronger than unnecessary? Like they're both kind of vague. It's not, because it's not clear what is meant by justified. This is why, like, for me, I just try to avoid these words. Like, I just try to literally just go, like, here's the action. We don't say this is okay for humans. What's the difference? Without even invoking words like justification or necessary or whatever. But it's still very clear what you're saying. It's not a big deal. I just think those words open rabbit holes.
They can't, they can't vote in court, but so can't certain humans. Some certain humans
are
born with
what I should say is, the other thing I should say is, because when I was commenting about you having better charisma up there, it's not just from not reading. It's also obviously some general speaking skill, because I guess you've just done a lot of this kind of stuff at this point. But you can just tell the other people don't have the same like energy going on. Like, do you kind of sense a difference of energy between yourself and them when you're talking? Like, you look hyped. You look like you're like into what you're saying.
Oh, I'm so passionate about this. Like, I was itching the whole time to get up and just, like for me, this is like I dedicate my entire life to this for a reason. I think it's a noble cause.
Sure.
And I think what they are defending is indefensible. And I've got complete confidence in that. Like, you don't need to be the most eloquent, well-spoken university student to defend this position. And, it's really easy once you see the clear, obvious double standards that they hold. And I do this every day. And I really didn't know where it was going to go, because it wasn't planned out, and there was a few things that, like, you might have, obviously looking back, I could have done better. But yeah, just speak from your heart. Like really, especially vegans, like watching. Like, don't be nervous to defend this position. It's really, we've got a really solid. It's solid. It's solid. Don't be nervous about this. Like, you've got it.
Yeah, I'd say one or two things there. So, firstly, when we're talking about defending the position and how like educated you are on it or whatever, it's like, yeah, just speaking honestly from the heart is like the most important thing. Okay, having all the like technical knowledge with the arguments is good and important and stuff, but just the honest message will resonate clearly with people who are kind of like open to listen. And then there is one other thing that I wanted to say there. It might have slipped my mind though. If it returns to me, I'll say it.
A mental disability. Do we treat them in a way that, breaches their right? Of course we don't. Of course we don't. Human baby. Now, you said, should we assign a human baby rights? Human baby rights. Human babies have fundamental rights protecting them. Protecting their liberty, their freedom, protecting them from abuse. You touch a child, where do you go? Prison.
Oh.
Okay, so they have rights. And you say, like, no, we can't equate babies with animals. Well, a pig, higher sentience, higher in intelligence, the fourth most intelligent animal on Earth. Okay, just before chimpanzees. And what's the next one?
I remember the other thing I was going to say, which is that you said, obviously looking back, there's things I could have said differently. I would think that someone lacks self-awareness if they didn't ever think that. Like, when we're talking in natural language, like, we will always say imprecise things. It's just inevitable. Like, I could watch back this very stream and run criticism on the things I've said and be like, okay, well, that wasn't totally clear. Like, right? So it's as far as I'm concerned, it's frankly just impossible to create, to go into some live speaking event and not have, like, little corrections to make afterwards. Hindsight is always 20/20. That's just, like, the nature of the thing. So I also wanted to say that, because you saying, like, sure, obviously there's one or two things I could have done better. It's like, that's not really a sign that there's anything wrong with what you're doing. In fact, anyone who doesn't think that, there's something wrong with them. I can rewatch any debate I've been in and go, oh, there's a better way to say that, or like, oh fuck, I said that a little imperfectly. I could have done that better. So that's just natural.
Okay.
Really, really intelligent beings. I mean, you could argue that a human baby, it's just nothing more than, a dribbling. They don't really have much to offer the world. Okay, but we would never rob them of their sentience. We'd never abuse them. They have fundamental rights protecting them. The right to drive a car, get a license.
One little problem with babies, this is just a psychological thing, it's not a logical thing. People naturally go to but babies will become something in the future. That's why it's a bit better to use mentally challenged people, in my opinion. Do what you want, obviously, but because with a mentally challenged person, people don't automatically try to come up with this counter in their head of like, oh, in the future they're going to do something. They kind of accept that, like, yeah, this is just someone who's not going to be contributing in certain ways or doing certain things. So
hey. So this doesn't coincide with your potential. You know how you talked about the potential clutch of cells. This is like potential further sentience.
Well, yeah, this is a bit different. They're both potential things. So the potential arguments with the cells basically come down to this non-sentient being has moral value because of its potential. So that's different than saying what are we saying here about a baby? It's about a being that's already sentient, and you're talking about what it can like do for society. So this is kind of similar, where someone might try to say like, oh, animals like don't have value because they can't do anything for society or something like this. You might go to a baby and be like, oh, well, what are they going to do? They're just drooling and whatever. Is it okay to kill them? And then they might try to say, well, they have the potential to do something in the future. So it's still like, it's the only similarity is the invoking of potential, but it's definitely two different kinds of arguments. And again, the problem with this is like look, if someone does want to use that, that's fine, right? They can change their kind of moral value criteria from just being able to contribute to like, being able to contribute like in the future or something. Also like having the potential to contribute. But then all you have to do to get around that is just change to a human who doesn't have the potential, right? And we're still not going to say it's fine to kill them.
No, it's good.
To vote, I mean, some humans aren't even assigned those rights. I'm talking about fundamental rights of liberty, bodily integrity, the right to live, the right not to be enslaved and subjugated and murdered. Cambridge Declaration of Consciousness. Wow, it was signed right here. Okay. Now, no one's going to argue that animals aren't sentient. I don't think anyone in the scientific community of any merit thinks animals are not sentient. I mean, it's quite obvious that they are. There's someone inside of there, someone with wants, desires, and needs. Someone who wants to avoid, pain. They have the desire for well-being. So, what is the difference between us and animals, where we feel like we're morally justified to, subjugate them, to steal their children from them, to put them inside of gas chambers, rip the flesh off of their bones, stick knives into their throats? What is the difference, the morally significant difference between them? Okay, because we could argue there are humans of, if you believe in sentience hierarchy, lower sentience than animals, contribute less to society than animals could. But we never rob them of their rights. So I think legality and morality get conflated and mixed up and confused. What's legal isn't always moral. I mean, just look 200 years in the past to see that slavery was once legal. It wasn't moral. And I would argue that there is no morally significant difference between us and animals that justifies killing them. And for that reason, I think to murder a human is just as morally unjustified as murdering an animal. Okay? And I think we should assign animals
slight
rights.
phrasing thing there.
Okay,
so this is just phrasing.
Certain humans.
Yeah, but I think that a better way to phrase it is to say that both killing animals and humans are like you consider them both wrong, or they both cross the threshold into being not okay ethically.
Yeah.
You don't want to say there's no difference. Well, maybe you do, but I'll test if you really think that. Look, if you have to murder either a mouse or a child, no third option, which are you going to do?
Well, it depends on. Well, what about like so? I guess when I say human, what about a higher sentient animal and a human of lower sentience? You know what I mean? Like, it's the same scenario. Like, well, what about an elephant, a grey elephant, and mentally retarded baby? Like, so would there be a morally significant difference between killing one or the other? Like,
no, obviously. Here, one second.
Justified as murdering an animal. Okay. And I think we should assign animals rights.
Yeah. So you said that killing a human is just. Sorry, you said killing a human is just as unjustified as killing an animal. So, there's like a kind of problem there because you can point to cases where it would be more justified to kill the animal, like what I was doing, and you can point to cases where it would be less justified to kill the animal, like what you're doing, when the animal is more sentient.
Yeah.
And another thing is like just kind of my original point is like most of the animals we're talking about when we're talking about farmed animals, it actually is more justified to kill one of those than a human. Like, look, I say this completely shamelessly. If I have to kill a human baby or a cow, I will murder the fuck out of that cow. That does not mean that I think that it's ethical to murder cows. Does not mean that I think that we should be killing them for food or anything like this. It just means that I'm a rational person. I care about well-being. I look at the life of a cow. I look at the life of a human. And I say, which is worse to remove from the universe? And it's obvious that it's worse to remove the more sentient being. And again, it's not anthropocentric, it's sentiocentric. I'd say the same thing if the human were the less sentient being. So I think that...
So to throw that back at you, like...
Sure.
If there was mentally disabled human... Sorry, this is a really... This is a rough question. Sorry, guys. Let me just say this. This is a philosophical discussion here. We're throwing hypotheticals here. Okay. Just if there was a human being, like, say, mentally disabled human being who could never experience the sentience of a cow, and you had a decision between this cow and this human being, you would obviously murder the human being, yeah?
Yeah. Assuming that there's no like externalities, because what people do in their head is they map out externalities and they go like, oh, what about the suffering of the family? Like if you say everything else is held constant, it's just the human is less sentient than the cow, 100% murder the human, right? If you have to murder, if you're doing something evil, either way, right? It's a philosophical situation. There's not a third option. You have to murder either one or the other. It seems only rational to say that if what you care about is well-being, you should choose to murder the being who will have the least strong effect on reducing well-being. That just seems rational.
What about the cow was at a sanctuary, and this cow was loved by thousands of human beings, and to remove this cow would cause 1,000 human beings to be mourning, suffering, and
So
let's say this cow was like responsible at this sanctuary for educating people not to eat other cows, and then there was this human being of higher sentience than the cow, but just eats meat all day and contributes to harm, probably a little bit abusive to his wife and a bit of an alcoholic.
Okay, but now you just have to appreciate what you're doing. Now, I understand this is not a direct answer, but we're having friends having a conversation, not in a debate right now.
Yeah.
So, what you're doing is you're adding a lot of other variables to the situation and then asking me to compute an answer to something more complicated, right? So you're saying like, okay, let's say the human is a bad person. Let's say the animal brings a bunch of well-being into existence. Now is it okay to kill the human? So look, I can give you an answer in principle, right? So there's some point where it would actually be true that killing the human would be worse, and there's some point where killing the human would be better, and you'd have to scale up all of those consequences, right? So when you start making it like a multivariable equation, that's when I go, I don't know exactly if I can compute an answer to that. But when we give a simple situation and we just say everything else is held constant, so there's no difference in the externalities, like how many people suffer as a result or anything like this, every single thing is held constant. The only difference is one being is less sentient than the other. Which do you kill? I kill the less sentient one, whether that's a human or whether that's an animal. So yeah.
Because with me and this thing here, right? Like, because when you talk about what matters being well-being, like increasing well-being in the universe and reducing suffering in the universe, and you have a chicken, right? And you have a fully sentient human being. And 99.9% of fully sentient human beings in the context of today are consuming animal products. So they're causing a lot of suffering too. But they're they probably cause, just a normal average person is creating a lot of well-being too, and their sentience is, debatably much higher than the chickens. Okay, some people, but yes. So like this human being existing would cause all of this environmental destruction, the suffering of, or they eat factory farmed animals, that really high suffered flesh, and they're causing all of this suffering as well. There's a ratio there that's sort of like suffering to well-being ratio that the chicken is just like existing, pecking some, seed and maybe a worm here and there.
Well, no, I mean, both beings by existing will have some impact on like just the well-being to suffering ratio in the universe, like the chicken would and the human would, right? So I'm basically giving you a principled answer, which is like, there's a point where you'd be able to say that enough suffering comes about from one decision or enough well-being comes about from one decision that murdering one is worse than murdering the other, right? Like that, all I'm making is the principled point. I'm not telling you that I can answer every multivariable equation that you send at me of like, okay, the human, they rape like every other Tuesday, the animal, like, I mean, if you throw in enough things, eventually I'll just be like, okay, well, I don't know the exact answer to that. But like, I think we agree on the general point, right? Because like, remember, the quote of yours that I criticized was just when you said that murdering both is equally unjustified. So I think that it's obvious from this conversation that it actually kind of depends. So the better statement is something, if you want to be like just precise technically, it's something like both are over the threshold where I say it's not okay to murder them.
Yeah.
Because then you don't have to make this further claim that they're equal. You can just say they're both over this line, and that's a way easier point to defend too.
It would. Yeah, definitely. And also like me saying that, like it wouldn't be the be all and end all of the, if someone were to come and challenge me on that, then we could get into all of this. Like, so it wouldn't be like, so, but if I had like one time to like say something to someone, then I would want to make sure that I map it out pretty well in that first, know, but the thing is like any of these like off the cuff mistakes that I make, like can be like, we can, if he questioned me on that and goes, well, so you don't think it's, you think it's equally unjustified to kill all humans over all animals. So you think it's just as equally unjustified to kill, Albert Einstein over, a frog. And I'll be like, well, like we can talk about that.
Yeah. So of course, like we can always like, also the use of the word mistake is kind of weird there because like, when you get any sense of how actual like formal logic works, you're going to look at your natural language and you're just going to watch it and you're going to be like, I give like incomplete inferences like all the time. I say like unperfectly phrased sentences all the time. Like I use terms that are slightly different in the same way. Like you'll just notice all of these little imperfections. So I think it's only a mistake when it's like it's hard to say exactly when it's a mistake because it's like there's a threshold you can set on what constitutes a mistake, and if you set it low enough, everyone's making mistakes constantly. You can really set that if you set the threshold for like saying something that's like, like deductively invalid, then we're all making mistakes constantly when we're speaking in natural language. Or if you set the threshold up really high of like making a mistake is saying something that clearly, uncontroversially, directly contradicts your position, then it's like, well, people rarely make that kind of mistake. So I think that just a little flag is that saying you even made mistakes, it's questionable what exactly that means. But then the main point that I wanted to make is just we could talk about imperfections. I prefer the word imperfections to mistakes, right? Me and you can watch this over and we can go, well, here's a little thing you said that if you made this more precise like this, that would rule out all of these criticisms that someone could use. So it's just like refining down what could, how we could say our things. And I do this with my own speech all the time to try to like just whittle off all of the needless stuff, so I'm good at getting like right to the core of it.
Cool.
Cool.
I like it.
I do too. That's why I said it.
Just basic rights. The right not to be treated. Just what? Actually, I just asked for one right. The right not to be treated as property, as someone else's, as a product.
Okay, I can pick bones with that.
Yeah, me too.
Because that's getting into look, I know what you're getting at, and it's true. Like, when we think of other beings like property, we start like treating them in bad ways, and you're allowed to do all these weird things. Like, I agree, animals shouldn't be property; they should be beings. Like, we're on the same page. But the thing is, like, I mean, is it possible to create a hypothetical situation where treating someone like property is like in their interests? And then if so, is that an optimally precise way to phrase it? Because like, could you not, is like, does, like, it just opens up these kind of questions. Like, is it possible to not treat someone like property, but to murder them? Like, I guess if you define that in such a way that, like, all of the bad things we can possibly think of doing to animals in some way involve treating them like property, then it could probably be fair. But if you're not sure that covers them all, then that might not be the ideal phrase.
Yeah, I guess, like, when you so when slaves were freed, human slaves, they were no longer considered property, but then they were afforded something else, which was like basic human rights. Yeah.
Sorry. What?
Like, because there was a time when you couldn't legally murder a slave. Like, you wouldn't get tried for murder if you murdered your slave.
Okay.
So because they were your property, so you can murder them. But like, so when they were liberated, they were afforded like certain, human rights. So I guess taking away that property status of humans, and then they added something as well, which was like, basic fundamental rights not to be, then they could be murdered. The laws did apply to them. There were laws protecting them. But before that, they were just considered tables and property, and, so I guess this would eliminating the property status of animals would need to then have something added, which would be these rights on top of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, look, with a lot of these things, it just depends how you define your terms. Like, if you define treating something like property broadly enough, then you could find a way to make every ethical wrong fit under treating something like property, and then be like, yep, this is the only thing I care about removing. But if you're not clear that you have a definition of treating something like property that's going to handle every example someone can throw at you, then I might not say I only care about one right. I don't know. So
I think it was a mistake to say that myself. Because there are definitely more, because he brings a scenario to me about hunting free animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the thing is, so someone could get around that in different ways. They could say, like, sure, even if the animal's free, you're like taking them as your property by killing them. Like, that is treating them like.
That's what I said. That's what I said. I said you're still treating them like they belong to you, and that they should be given, the freedom of their own bodily integrity, not to rob them of their life. I said that would be murder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, it's like, it just comes down to if you're going to be able to cover every ethical wrong with this property status thing, right? And if you're confident you are, then use the term. But if you're not, then maybe focus on that right as particularly important, but don't suggest it's the only one you care about.
Yeah,
that would be my angle.
Yeah, I agree.
That's all I would assign them. You don't have to give them a license and stuff like that. I understand that. So there's also a crime by law called murder by proxy. It's not where you with a knife kill the animal yourself, or you with a knife kill a human yourself. You assign others to do the job for you. Murder by proxy. Charles Manson, famous serial killer, was charged with murder by proxy. He got life in prison. Okay? When we purchase animal products, it's not us putting the knife in the animal's throat, but it's murder by proxy. Second-hand murder. So I feel like you didn't really answer the question, Will, about what is the difference between animals and humans that justifies a knife in the animal's throat, but moral treatment of human beings. And I'm happy to bang out what that difference is, and we can apply that in the animal context and see
I meant human context.
Yeah. But sorry, also, you threw us a curveball, Patrick, with the cultured meat idea. I think we focus on the 3 trillion animals that are murdered annually for flesh, and not the 3 companies that are bringing out prototypes for culture.
That's the thing, right? Like, we're always all going to be saying imperfect things, but like, you can only assume that over time you'll be able to minimize how many imperfections show up in your speech when you're talking about veganism. Like, I'm sure 10 years from now, if we look at like a Joey speech and how many things you identify as imperfections within it, it's going to go down significantly from wherever it is now. I would say the same about anyone who's like constantly talking on a topic, because they'll just naturally get more and more precise by like refinement over time.
And that's why it's good, like putting yourself out there. Like look, the fear of criticism is like the number one fear of human beings. Public speaking. You know, what are people thinking and talking about? Like, to overcome that fear, and like, because my evolution of this has been completely public. Sure. Like, all of my mistakes, everything I've ever said. Like, I could look back and like, there's so many things that I could have changed back. I've been evolving online for everyone to criticize and see, and it's sharpening me. It's sharpening me, and yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like, the thing is, when you have an audience, you have this, and I guess, yeah, I'll just talk about the audience in the context of the audience, but there's more things that are like this also. You have this like flow that's constantly coming at you that you can use to sharpen yourself if you have the right attitude, right? But there's also a way to have the wrong attitude. If you're like not receptive to it and you try to like combat all the criticism, then you like won't grow, right? You might develop sophistry to deal with some of the criticism, but that's like the wrong direction, right? Because this is a thing a lot of people can't get over. But if you do it, then your audience is just going to be this infinite source of like self-sharpening, right? Where it's like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Could meet when we have thousands of plant-based options already, but you know, we could also argue that the meat inside a coconut is also meat, and that's not murder too.
Nice.
You know, but I think
that's a really
for the
good point,
right? benefit of this debate, meat is definitely 100%.
Yeah. So that's a really good analogy, because that like shows how he's doing something kind of trivial that's like really not, it's not interesting, it's a semantic game, it's not addressing the core point, right? Like, yeah, okay, there's coconut meat, that's not murder, now meat's not murder, bravo, like debate won, right? It's not really dealing with, I think we could all agree it's not dealing with the substance of the issue, which is animal treatment. I think even a meat eater would probably agree with that. Anyone who knows like some logic, some philosophy will be like, yeah, you can, you know, score points on a technicality, but yeah, the real point is about animal treatment, and the coconut meat analogy shows the triviality of focusing on lab meat.
Also, what do you think of my ending statement here? Let's just
sure, I'll play it.
Go back to
murderous as shooting a
4310.
In my opinion, that the meat inside a coconut is also meat, and that's not murder too. You know, but I think for the benefit of this debate, meat is definitely 100% just as murderous as shooting a human child in the head, in my opinion, and that's it.
Like, maybe not the potential thing, but in and of themselves, if like, let's just say we held animals here and the human child stayed the same age and sentience and intelligence forever.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because the thing is, like, look, I agree with what you're saying, but if someone wants to be philosophically obnoxious, they can go, well, Joey, like, are they exactly as bad as each other? How are you quantifying, right? Like, so, I mean, technically, the precise statement would be something more like, you know, look, killing an animal for meat, I don't see, or what would be a way to phrase it? That is clearly over the threshold of what I consider wrong, and so is stabbing a child in the head. Like, just, you can still phrase them where you're using them both, but you just need to phrase it in terms of they're both past the threshold of being not okay, as opposed to they're both exactly equivalently immoral. Because even saying that within the human context is like, you know, you know, like stabbing someone and making food of them is exactly as bad as shooting a child in the head with a gun. It's like, well, they're both bad. I grant you they're both bad, but like, what does it mean to say they're exactly as bad as each other? So
I mean, yeah, we could create like, you know, like shooting Mother Teresa and shooting Charles Manson. Like, are they exactly as bad as each other? is like, I mean, you could attach heaps of things to it, like.
Well, yeah, like I'm honestly, the criticism I'm giving right now is not like, it's not interesting. I'm just pointing out how someone who just wants to be philosophically annoying, who just wants to be a pain in your ass, would go about doing it. But and I'm just saying the statement is totally fine. It's perfectly clear what you mean, and it makes your point nicely. But to be precise about it technically, so you don't open up a sophistry pathway there, would just mean just say both are over the threshold of being wrong, right? It's just as clear to me that eating meat is over the threshold of being wrong as it is that, you know, shooting a child is over the threshold of being wrong. Well, can someone do it to that too? Can they go, well, is it just as clear? So there's a bit of a phrasing thing there, but like, well, Joey, see, this is the thing. Like, I deal with the absolute sophists on like the depth of the internet and like Discord and stuff every day, pretty much. So it's like I just anticipate like what sophistry will they say to this. But like, look, so I'd have to think for a minute about the perfect phrasing. But I'm just making the general point that making it clear that you're not saying they're exactly equivalent. You're just saying they're both obviously over a certain threshold. That just cancels out a lot of sophistry.
Yeah. No, definitely. I agree with that.
Okay, I'm going to just open up the floor specifically for Joey's speech, and then we'll open up the floor more widely. So, Lauren.
With pets, we're in a bit of a pickle with domestication. Domestication is a problem that human beings created, okay? We created that problem, and you know what the alternative is to rescuing those animals, which it's the most vegan thing we can do, is rescue animals from shelters. They get a needle in the arm, and they go, you know, they get killed, they get euthanized, or sometimes they're gas chambered. So the most moral thing for us to do is to control them from breeding, so we have less of this problem, and rescue them from shelters without otherwise be killed. Okay, we can't let animals free, domesticated animals free in society, because they get collected by the RSPCA and taken to a shelter, and if they're not, you know, rescued by someone, they're killed. So we have no option with that. But is meat murder? Yes. Is the flesh of a dog murder? Yes.
I couldn't exactly hear her question. What did she say?
She just said, "What about pets?"
Oh, okay. I thought she gave some like prior statement of like, you think this, so what about pets? Like as if like I thought she was trying to show that there's some problem with it with respect.
She
to
might have. I can't really remember.
I couldn't hear what she said there, but either way, your answer on pets is clear enough. It's like, I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable take on pets. I just
not that technically the most moral thing we could do though. Like I think it's the most moral option we have. Like, if you wanted to get really like, is it really the most moral thing we can do?
Exactly. Well, no. See, the thing is, as annoying and stupid as like a criticism like that would be, like I literally thought that while you were talking, and I was like, okay, I'm not gonna just like annoy Joey with all the little stupid interpretations. But it's good that you're savvy to them, because if you're noticing them for yourself, then you're noticing like the kind of things that a sophist can say to you if they want to, right? So yeah. But no, like technically it's not the most moral thing we could do. We could do that and then go work at a soup kitchen. Like, okay, like bravo, own the vegan. Vegan's wrecked. Okay, let's keep going. But yeah, your take on pets
just
nice
sort of building on what I last asked, just so we're 100% sure of what we're dealing with here. And it's a very simple yes/no question. Would you feel the same way about killing a baby as you would a chicken? Just sort of binary yes/no.
Would I feel the same way?
As in, if you had to kill a chicken and a human
my
baby,
feelings on
just
killing.
Yes or no, would you feel the same way about?
Well, my feelings on killing. Yes.
You told me about that.
Yes, but my feelings on. Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
But my feelings on killing a human baby and a chicken had got nothing to do with the morality of it.
So you kill a baby as easily as
So,
you kill a
but
chicken.
my feelings on the topic have got nothing to do with it.
Okay, noted.
So
Noted. Oh, got you there.
Well,
Refuted veganism there.
I can throw that back at you.
That's all right.
Okay. Yeah.
So for you as well, the same that you asked him.
Yeah.
So if you know about the
Yeah, so that was like a perfectly clear answer, right? And Vegan Gains gives like an answer kind of like this, but actually more extreme, right? He'll just straight up say, my feeling is that it would be like I would get more pleasure or I'd suffer less from seeing like a human baby die than an animal die, right? He goes further than you, but then he says the exact same thing, right? He says, but I don't, on my moral system, you know, my personal feelings about it is not the thing that determines what's ethical or not, right? So it's like, yeah, that's fine. Like you can say I personally feel the same about killing a chicken and killing a baby if you truly do. I don't, but if you do, then okay. But it's good to distinguish that from your moral system, right? Because you could hold a moral system that says what you feel about it is not what determines its moral value, right? Like if you're like a consequentialist or something, it's like your feelings about.
Well, it's like, dude, like I wouldn't feel the same. Like I would feel like killing you and killing my brother. I would feel better killing you. That doesn't tell me whether or not like killing you is more moral than killing my brother. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
no, yeah, exactly. Perfect. Sure.
You're both equally, you know, like, and yeah, like I would have people don't understand. I would have a really hard time killing a chicken. Like that would haunt me. Chicken's a beautiful animal. Like it would fuck me up for life. Like intentionally cutting the head off of a bird. Yeah. Like I wouldn't feel good about either of them. Like you're asking me, like you know, I protect these animals. I dedicated my life to defending these animals. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And like, yeah, like they're innocent. Like, and if I had to hack the head off of a bird, that would haunt me. I would suffer severe trauma from that. And if I had to, you know, stab a baby in the neck, it's gonna mess me up as well. Like, you know, like, and who's the mother of this baby? Like, you know, I don't know. It's just, but like my feelings on something doesn't tell you whether or not it's ethical or moral or whether they're morally equivalent or.
Well, yeah, again, there's a sophistry pathway where someone could hold a system that says what is moral is what I feel, right? But like, again, that's obviously not your moral system, so.
He said his moral systems are intuitive morality.
Well, yeah, that there's something weird about that, because, like that, there's a whole pathway there, we don't have to even go down that, but, there's one more thing I want to say about that point about moral systems. No, I don't remember. It's gone. It's all good though.
Atrocities of the animal agriculture. You say yourself that you still prefer the real thing, as you said.
Yeah.
So knowing how badly the animals are treated, knowing.
Oh yeah, I remember. And he tried to do a very sort of sophist move on you there with that gotcha, where he tried to just ask you the yes or no question. And then just be like, haha, like stupid vegan, basically. Because he wants to use this straw man of you, right? Where it's that you believe in this thing he's calling radical equality, where maybe cows get like the right to drive or something, like who the fuck knows. So when he hears you say, I feel the same about them, he just wants to not let you say anything else and let that be the point where he's just going to say, like, just try to kind of play it off. Like, yep, there's the radical equality showing itself yet again, right?
I knew what he was trying to do. Like that's why I was trying to explain before I answered. Then I remembered that it's not a good idea, so I answered and then explained. And he was trying to do what I fear when people ask me these loaded yes or no questions. They try to go yeah, completely refuted, and then they don't. Like when I was on the radio that time, I was really avoiding it because I was thinking, oh, he's going to use that. Pigeonhole me in here, and you know, so I was like, but yeah, easy enough just to answer.
And another thing you can do is you can say, okay, I'm going to answer, but I want to provide context after. My answer is yes, but like that's not that objectionable, right? That's just you trying to say you want to say something after.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's continue.
When they die, knowing the environmental impact on it. What is your justification for carrying on doing it?
Well, I think that's a separate question to the idea of meat as murder, because as I said before... I mean, no, fair enough, because actually, before this evening, I honestly didn't think that there were people who could say I could kill a human infant child as easy as I could a chicken. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
That's a straw man.
No.
He's going for some pretty cheap point scoring there.
I remind people that it's Q&A, please.
So I obviously misheard it, but I mean the point is that
wait,
there
can you
is
stop for a
qualitative
second?
difference.
Like, he said, would you feel the same way? He didn't say, would you be able to do it as easy? Or was that technically the same thing?
Is it an implication of saying that you'd feel the same? Presumably, how easily you'd do it. I mean, if the ease of doing it is like a psychological thing, it's not about like the physical difficulty, then it might be that one implies the other.
I could close my eyes.
Well, here, let's just find out right now, right? Like, if you had to kill a chicken or a human, which would you find easier to kill? So this isn't a statement about which you think is more moral to kill, just which would you find more easier to kill if you had to?
Well, there's many things. If I pushed a button with a blindfold on...
No, you have to stab them. Yeah.
I have to stab them in the neck?
Let's just put it like that, yeah.
So we were trying to find out which one is going to be easier?
Yeah, just whatever answer honestly comes to you. Just visualize stabbing a person and visualize
dude, I can't. This is really hard, eh?
So maybe the answer you should have given is that you're actually not sure. Sounds like you're not sure.
No, but this is the thing. There were two different things here. He said, would you feel the same way
and would it be
if you had to kill? And the next one was, I honestly didn't believe I would ever hear someone say they could kill a human infant child as easily as they could kill a chicken.
Yeah, so
it's like it sort of made me feel like it's easy. It's easy for me to kill an infant child. They're both hard,
Oh, okay.
They're both fucking hard.
Okay, yep.
Like,
I didn't even catch that actually. That's a good point to make. Yeah, because there's an implication there that, like, yeah, I guess it kind of comes off like that. When you say just as easily, it makes it sound like both fall in the category of being easy to do. Whereas you could be saying that, yeah, they're both, I feel this like the same about them, but they're both in the category of being extremely hard to do, right?
Oh.
Which,
yeah.
So
I would harbor guilt for killing a chicken. Like I would harbor that guilt. Like when I was younger, I was about 18, 19. We killed a cat, right? And I wasn't even a vegan. I was a violent street. We were street gangsters. We were violent. That haunted me for a year. Killing that cat.
Yeah.
We killed that cat with a shovel. That haunted me for a year. I was like, whoa, I was having triggers that I was, it messed me up, like more than like, and I'd had gang fights and, I'd hit people with bats and bottles and we'd have these street fight. Nothing messed me up more than killing that cat. Now, I mean, if I killed a baby, probably the same. Like, I don't like, but yeah. So to say you could kill an infant baby as easy as kill a chicken, it was like sort of, yeah.
Okay, so there's multiple things that are weird about this then. So one of them is that it's not clear that you saying that you would. Okay, sorry. Let me think about it. What was the second? The thing he goes to is that it's easier for you. It's just as easy for you to kill them both. What was his question to you though?
His question was, would you feel the same way?
Would you feel the same? Okay, so one of the things that's contentious is, does feeling the same way about killing both of them mean that it's equivalently easy? So that's a bit contentious. Then the other is, what does Joey actually feel about this? It's not 100% clear. And then the third is, either way, even if we grant that you hold some position, we could even go to a more extreme position, like Vegan Gain's position. You could say, I find it easier to kill a human than an animal. That wouldn't say anything about what your actual morality says. And then fourthly, there's the point that he's embedding the notion that you find both easy as opposed to both hard. So there's like many layers of sort of sophistry going on there.
Yeah, and I felt like he went with the easy because he wanted to make me sound even more like irrational and insane and like.
Well, look, Joey, what do you think is harder? Climbing Mount Everest or I don't know, like learning, like going and fighting in Iraq for like a few days or something. Like I don't freaking know. I can give you two things though, where you're gonna be like, well, look, I don't know which is harder. Like they're both really freaking hard. And I can be like,
hard.
so
Do I have to
wait,
choose?
but then they're equivalently easy, aren't they? Right? Because technically it's true. Like if you think they're equivalently hard, it seems like by definition you also think they're equivalently easy. But which word you choose to use, equivalently hard or equivalently easy, affects how it comes across to people.
Of course.
Right? Yeah.
And that was his whole, you know, he was like, oh, he thought he had me there. Yes. He was like, I don't know.
I don't even know if he thought he had you or if he just wanted to get the gotcha. Like, I don't even fucking know. He definitely tried to pull off a gotcha, though. Just like, okay, like not letting you elaborate and then just be like, I didn't know there were people out there who are, you know, just think that there's no friggin' difference between murdering an infant and a chick. Like, that's basically what he's doing. It's just kind of stupid. And it's all for him to reinforce this notion that vegans believe in this, like, radical equality, which, again, that's an objectionable term because things are either equal or not. It doesn't come in degrees. So it seems weird to me to talk about radical equality, but it's also just part of this big straw man argument, which I spelled out a few times, but, like, look, if you say either, meat is not murder, or we believe in radical equality. We don't believe in radical equality, therefore meat is not murder. It's like, that's deductively valid, but the first premise is just wrong. It's like, it's not a dichotomous choice, right? You could believe that meat is murder and not believe in radical equality. So it's like there's this huge counterexample to his position, which he seems to just ignore.
Quite frankly. And that actually humans, I think, as we can all see, and I would say probably intuitively feel, have a certain level of sentient complexity, which is above and beyond.
Not all humans. Not all humans, though.
Sorry, please come in.
There's also
this
is like a philosophical thing also, but he's talking about intuitions and intuitionism, and there's a difference between like you can talk about the ultimate grounding of your, like you can talk about something called meta-ethics where you're talking about the nature of morality and where exactly does it like come from, this kind of stuff. And if saying you're an intuitionist in that sense is a bit different than saying you have this like normative axiom where any intuition you have is just justified, right? So you also don't want to allow equivocation there. That's like a bit of a technical thing we don't have to go into, but you know, someone could be an intuitionist but not actually hold a normative axiom that says whatever my intuitions are good. So that's a point that weirds people out, but it's true. Okay, let's keep going.
Q&A. So ask him questions. You'll have more chance to argue with him.
Yes, no, come back to me.
Don't worry.
So we'll take 2 more questions directly for Joey, and then we'll open up the floor more generally. So yeah, just the hand there. I can't see. Just here.
A controlling of animals breeding. The thing, if we would not hold a double standard if there was a problem like that for human beings, okay? So if there was a problem that was uncontrollable, like what's happening to domesticated animals, what's the alternative? The alternative to not controlling their breeding is they get murdered in a shelter. So this is the most vegan option we have. But is meat murder? Yes. So I feel like this isn't even on topic, but it's fine. We can go out into this moral grey area. But for me and other vegans, the most vegan and moral thing we can do is rescue these animals and control their breeding. Otherwise, what do we do if we just lead them to the devices and let them breed more puppies into existence? There's more numbers, and guess what? More pigs, more dogs, pigs, cows. They're all the same to me, you see. No speciesism here. More dogs are going to get killed in gas chambers, and yeah. But is dog meat murder? Yes. Is cow meat murder? Yes. Is pig meat murder? Yes. Also, there are differences between humans and animals, okay? There are, but what is the difference that justifies us stabbing cows in the throat and not human beings? What is the morally significant difference? Yes, there's differences in sentience. You know, maybe this elephant's more sentient.
Yeah, so with I didn't catch the exact shelter question there, but like, I mean, it sounds like you're just making some general point that, like, look, we're just trying to...
She was like, it's immoral. It's immoral to... Don't you think it's immoral to control animals breeding?
Well, it's the same thing as that sheep wool question, isn't it? That you got that one time with Nick Ferrari? Where it's like, look, whether the thing is immoral or not is going to depend on if it's in the animal's interest.
Yeah.
Right? So that's sort of what it seems like to me. And I don't know the
Well,
details here.
it's technically like it's not in the individual animal's best interest, but the animals that are like, so it would be the puppies that are born into a world where they would have to be it's like the problem, like you know so.
And you can't like look to argue against caring about the interests of future beings is a very weird thing to do, right? Like, because we care about the interests of like we care about the interests of future generations, for example. That's why we're concerned about something like global warming, right? It's not going to really do anything too brutal in our lifetime. Presumably we're concerned about the future when we're concerned about that. So yeah, I mean, you could be concerned for the animals that will come into existence, not for it might not be a concern about that animal right there that's already alive.
It's just like what I said about the we wouldn't hold a double standard if humans were in that situation as well. Like, because the alternative is we let dogs breed as much as they want, and then we just keep, gas chambering and injecting them and killing them. So if we're in if humans were in a situation where if we kept breeding, we had to keep being murdered in shelters to control numbers, then if we're in some type of system like that, then the most moral thing to do would be to, control humans breeding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I don't know the pragmatic details, but I would certainly agree in principle that if what actually maximizes well-being for these beings and their descendants or whatever is just to control their breeding, then it's something that we want to do. Like, the core thing is, are we actually acting in their interests, or are we just overriding their interests for our own, right? And, it's obvious the case you're making is like, look, assuming breeding actually is in their controlling breeding is in their interest, it's something we want to do for them. It's not like a violation of their rights, like murder, which is obviously not in their interests.
Yeah.
Than a mouse, okay? But does that mean we should, walk up to a mouse and step on them, kill them?
Oh.
What is the difference that morally justifies us stabbing cows, but not an infant child, but not some human being of lower sentience or intelligence, which there are plenty of them. We treat them morally and we assign them rights. What is the difference? It's a double standard.
I'm just wondering if we'll have any people who are going to try sophistry and be like, well, you said you care about the potential, or you don't care about the potential with abortion, but you do care about these potential future animal lives. Like, is there some kind of weirdness going on there? And I'm just trying to think of what exactly the thing is there, because there's something wrong about that question. So with the abortion thing, you're not. It's the case that people are trying to make to you is that you should be treating a being that doesn't currently exist. You should be respecting its rights in its non-existent form, right? Like, that seems like a different thing than saying that we should be concerned about the future well-being of beings once they actually exist. So there's an equivocation there, right? Of you're worrying about an action that is going to have an impact once the thing actually comes into existence. In the other case, you're talking about currently caring about a being that only ever potentially exists.
Okay.
Is that not sufficiently clear? We could hash that out for a minute if we want to.
Yeah, let's go again.
Okay, I'm gonna try to think that one out. So with the abortion thing, it's obvious the thing that's weird to me about that is that you're concerned about you're trying to say that a being currently has rights and that being doesn't exist right now, right? So that seems
the clutch
obvious.
Of cells, you mean? You mean the clutch of cells?
Yeah. Oh, of course. I'm talking about the cells. Yeah, before they're sentient, right? So it's obvious to me that it doesn't have rights before it exists. But I would still be concerned about the world that I create that those beings are going to be coming into, right? So I have a concern for the future beings that do in fact come into existence, but I don't care about the rights of a being that doesn't currently exist, right? There's a difference between those two things.
Yeah.
So we could care about the world that we shape in the future for the beings that are actually going to be around, without simultaneously saying that beings that don't currently exist have rights. Yeah. Because in that case, it's about where the violation manifests, right? So if the actual animals come into existence, then the suffering and the violation of their rights actually manifests in their life. If the thing never comes into existence, the violation never manifests in its life. That's the violation. Or, sorry, that's the distinction there. One second. Hey. Oh, you're home, dude. Okay, I should clear right out of your place then.
You guys let me see up, like how much time you got left.
Not too long. Could we run until 7? Do you care?
No, that's fine.
7? Okay. All right, that's my boy Armand. So I think we're going to cut this at 7. So let's get through it. All good? Oh, can you still hear me, Joy?
Yeah, I'm good.
Oh, okay, cool. Nice.
I'll take one more question and then we'll open it up fully. So, any new hands? Okay, we'll go Joe at the back.
I feel like my point is almost kind of rather has a small scope compared to all the grand moral arguments. But to me, at least, in my kind of semantic and syntactic interpretation of the phrase meat and murder seems to be one on principle, wherein any instance of meat falls into the set of things which are murder. So I would think make a lot, very, very, very significant moral points and arguments which are more sophisticated than the one.
This guy goes on for about 5 minutes, so I think.
What you've established there seems to be that animal meat is murder, which is, is a totally sensible premise. But that's not saying that
people keep making the same mistake. Animal meat is murder. Like, look, I agree with what this guy's saying, I think, because he is pointing out the issue of equivocating them, but, well, I don't want to use that word, but of just talking about these two things like they're the same thing, the lab meat and then the actual animal murder meat, but saying, look, animal flesh is murder, or whatever he just said there. Well, no, the lab meat is still animal flesh.
It's the same thing.
So you still need to be more precise than that even, but he's still, like, I think his point's going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Is murder, which is, I think, Patrick gave an example wherein something falls into category of meat, but not to murder. And I think that in this scenario, though I think you haven't said anything wrong at all, I'd say that it doesn't, for me at least, and you might have a different interpretation of what emotion is, it doesn't prove the principle of murder. It proves the principle that killing animals.
I'm waiting for the question.
Yeah.
Joe, would you like?
Can you repeat that question? Where does the word meat originate from? And I think, like, look, we've got plant-based meat alternatives too that you could call meat, and we call the plant-based alternatives chicken. But are they directly murdering a chicken? No, but like coconut meat, is that murder? No, and cultured meat, if they don't exploit an animal, they might take a cell and create an infinite amount of chicken flesh and didn't murder anyone in the process. Is that murder? No, I'm not going to argue that is murder. But I think for the 3 trillion animals that are stabbed and have the flesh ripped off their bones, that meat, the 3 trillion a year, a conservative estimate, 2.7 million.
Yeah, so you're just being clear and honest. You're not trying to dogmatically defend the proposition. You're just like, look, this is what I'm talking about. This is murder. The other things, sure, they're not, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's a good answer.
Trillion marine animals, and yes, my friend.
Can we take? Sorry, should we take 2 votes at the end of this then?
Yeah.
Is meat murder the topic that was actually placed before, and then is animal meat murder, which is exactly what you have argued, and everyone in this.
Okay, it's
same thing.
It's funny because they keep thinking that this semantic correction gets around the problem, and it's like, no, the lab meat is still animal meat. But I do appreciate what he's trying to do, even though he's arguing for, if he eats meat, he's doing something that's kind of evil here. It's like I do appreciate him trying to say, like, look, it's obvious that there's like some weirdness with this debate prop, so we can just vote on both props. Like that's actually a magnanimous thing for him to do, being on the other side and knowing that he can score his points if he doesn't do that. So I do think that's a respectful move.
He wanted us to concede the whole proposition, though.
Well, no, he's saying that he's willing to vote to have a two.
Yeah. He wanted to create a sub one, like, is animal meat murder, and the main proposition is meat murder. He wanted us to concede because of his lab meat thing.
But we
so
do,
he would be like,
we do though.
Yeah,
I do concede because of his lab meat thing, don't you?
Yeah, I know. But like even everyone on the panel except for even Will says like, look, I think we all come into this debate, with the presumption that we're talking about, with the assumption we're talking about. Yeah.
No, look, no, I agree. Like
technically he's right. But
yeah,
like,
I just think that like maybe I'm reading him wrong, but it seems like an amicable thing to do because it seems like he's going like look, I know I can technically like win or at least come out not wrong on a technicality here, right? So I'm saying like let's even have a separate vote just on what you're obviously actually trying to say and see if people agree with that. So I mean, I perceive that as magnanimous because like I would concede that it's not always the case that meat is murder. And you've obviously said, like you just said in this video, it's like one cell taken from some animal and that creates infinite meat forever. Of course that's not murder, right? So, yeah, I mean...
He's actually right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but I think he's probably being magnanimous because it sounds like he's trying to say...
He ruined the game. Ruined the game. He's come along and he's just ruined it all.
Well, it seems to me like he's trying to say it seems like he's trying to be fair and he's being like, look, we're talking about different things, so let's just have a vote on both, okay? On the thing, just meat generally, and then on animal flesh, which again, it's technically the same thing, but like we know what it means.
I personally think it brought in a really interesting part into the debate that I didn't foresee, and I thought it like an interesting dynamic. It was like, wow, this is a curveball. Like it was kind of. I thought it was kind of, yeah.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is, like, Joe, you don't have to be dogmatically attached to the proposition either, right? Like, in the debate, you can just go, like, yeah, we have these debates, and, like, often the proposition doesn't perfectly capture what we think, right? So, like, I'll concede to you that you can technically find meat that's not murder. I concede that technicality. What I'm talking about is, the killing of animals for meat. So it's just fine to do that, because you don't have to defend something that doesn't perfectly capture what you think. You just say, look, they needed a vegan to debate. This was the debate topic. I'm like generally okay defending that side, but I'm not saying I precisely defend this sentence under all possible interpretations. This is what I'm defending right here. Okay, I give you your technicality, but this is my point and it stands. That's fair to do.
Room probably agrees with. Should we take 2 votes?
No, I was. I mean, I think. Well, at least I think we all went into this debate saying it is meat, as we commonly understand it, murder. So,
it's a bit of a curveball.
I like how his own
take it,
teammates arguing against it.
But.
No, I'm just making this fun. I guess it's semantic. Obviously, we're going to take 1 vote, but they are 2 very different topics, aren't they?
Well, we could say, is milk exploitation of a cow? And you could say, well, what about coconut milk? What about oat milk? And the debate's finished. I mean, clever, but yeah.
Gentleman at the back, please. Oh, sorry, just to interrupt you. Could you say who you are directing the question to, if you are directing the question? If you are directing a question to someone.
You've got 1 question because we've got a lot of people to get through.
The reason that no one's actually eaten from meat is because you're not legally allowed to call it meat, and it's not actually legally available commercially. It's not meat, it's something else.
So hard to hear.
He said the reason
they need room mics, dude.
He said you can't legally call lab meat, and it's not commercially available, and yada yada yada.
Yeah, see, that's silly, right? Because that's them trying to fight back, so you can still win the proposition. But it's like, do you really want to get in a pragmatic battle about what constitutes like meat and be like, look, technically, like if we decide that we can only use the legal definition, this currently isn't considered meat. That it's like. That's just so pedantic and so not necessary to go there. Just what we're talking about is killing animals for meat. That's what we were saying is wrong. Let's just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Then you can ask, would you feel different killing an infant or an old person? There is a difference. However, I am on the side that there is a very big difference between killing an animal and killing a person. And you keep asking for the difference, and in my opinion, it is written on your t-shirt. The one thing that I don't believe animals can do is hope. And when you kill an infant,
evidence.
Kill its potential for life.
where is your evidence of that animals can't hope or desire or want or avoid pain and suffering? And
so here you're doing a pragmatic thing, right? Which is fine if you want. But just be aware that if you're talking to someone with the right knowledge, you can end up in a really gnarly conversation here, right? So if you talk to someone who has a bunch of knowledge of like neuroscience and psychology, they might just, even if they know it's false, they might just be able to use enough terms and stuff to make you go like, frig, I can't argue that their brain is technically capable of this on the spot. Like, I don't have the data for that. So that's a pathway that's just avoidable by going down the principled road, right? And just saying like, look, if there's a human who can't hope to any greater degree than a chicken, is it fine to kill them? So the pathway is fine. Like, if you're sure that you're going to be able to shut it down and prove they can hope, go for it. But if you're at all worried that there's like a pragmatic battle there that you might not be able to win if someone cracks out a bunch of like neuroscience and psychology data, then just grant the point for the sake of argument and show that it still won't get them their conclusion.
Yeah, and I actually picked this out afterwards. I was like, well, I didn't even need to go down that route, like, because and that was like, so I'll be more, because this is like one of the first proper times I've been able to sort of do this name the trait. Usually I go dog and pig, but I thought, man, you know what, like lately the last two I've done like the radio debate with the BBC guy. I was going I was doing the human comparison too.
Yep.
Yeah, I think like I'll be more switched on to it because you just boom, boom, boom. But yeah, but also for me, like, because we did a lot of like my researchers were we like, there's this book called The Emotional Lives of Animals, and like, I don't know, like, animals hoping, like, I just think that's such a it's such an easy thing to prove. Like, what is hope?
Yeah, but
like, I don't know.
Think about this. Like, do you know how hope is like represented, like, in terms of like brain activity? Like, do you know what areas of the brain?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
See,
okay,
like,
yeah.
and I'm not saying that their point is even true, right? I wouldn't be surprised at all if like hope, as we define it currently when we're looking at, like, you know, brain research or whatever, if they look at hope, if that's the thing they look at, that it's something animals do too. That's fully possible, right? But it's just that you don't know those things, right? You don't know by those things. I mean, you don't know about neuroscience. You don't know about psychology. So
Yeah.
just you want to avoid opening pathways that lead you having to defend something you're not sure of. What are you showing me on your phone?
I just, yeah, that's so true. What you're saying, it was completely not necessary to go out into the pragmatics of that, but it's quite simply a feeling of expectation and desire for a particular thing to happen. Like, say that, like, you know, like a dog, right? There was this, so that, what was this scientist? It's a very famous study. Dr. Doug Lye was talking about it the other day. I was watching one of his streams, and so a dog would start to salivate at the same time every day when the scientists would present food.
Yeah, you think of like the Pavlov stuff, like Pavlovian conditioning.
Yeah, Pavlovian conditioning. Yeah, and so like the dog would salivate at the same time every day.
Oh, yeah.
So that fits the definition perfectly.
Well, yeah. Anyone who knows animals, like, they understand, like, look, when the cat goes and it's like jumping on the door, that's because the cat knows if it does that, you'll let it out, right? It's like when the dog goes and sits by its bowl, that's because the dog knows that if it does that, you'll realize it's hungry and give it food. So it's like, these things seem compatible with the word hope. Like, I think that hope, as commonly understood, is probably something that animals are doing. That's my opinion. But I'm just saying that there's just these
avoidable.
It's just, it's look, again, it depends what kind of algorithm you want to run, right? If you want to run the Avi algorithm and just go, I'm going to hit everything in practice and in principle, it's like, go for it. But the one I run is just refute it in principle, so you can be as concise as possible. Only hit the pragmatics if the pragmatics will actually stop the principled point from landing. So it's a matter of choice.
I don't like people thinking that animals are like, you know, mindless, feelingless machines either. Like, so it's kind of like, I felt in like kind of secondary insulted by it. Like, how dare you think animals can't hope?
Yeah.
Who do you think you are? Like, this is like akin to saying fish can't feel pain.
Yeah.
Who, like, and the obvious things like them avoiding a knife and stuff, like.
Well, yeah. Look, you can also do this. You can make it clear. We kind of talked about this earlier. You can make it clear that you're not sold on the pragmatics without hinging your point deeply on something that you're going to need, like data to defend that you don't have accessible, right? Because people might always raise things you don't have the data for on hand. So you can be like, look, I'm highly skeptical of that. Okay, I'm pretty sure that my dog hopes for food when he goes and lays by the bowl, but look, I'll just grant you for the sake of argument, let's say they can't hope. If a human can't hope, is it fine to kill them? Right? So that kind of achieves both, where like, without putting yourself really on the hook for something that you might need like brain science and psychology data for, you can be like, look, my experience of life has led me to be highly skeptical of that being true, but like whatever, I'll grant it for the sake of argument, like it still doesn't land you your point.
If I'm ever up against the brain scientist, I'll definitely avoid the pragmatics like that. But
dude,
you know,
even someone with like a first-year neurosci student will know tons of just words and neurosci lingo you won't know, and
they'll
just
know about the Pavlovian, dude.
Yeah, but they might. It's just that they might be able to say things that just, since they're just using a language game you don't know, just because you're not a neuroscience student, like you just won't be able to respond because you just won't, like, you just literally won't really know the things and the terms they're talking about. Like, my feeling is that you want to go out on a limb as infrequently as possible, right? Because the more frequently you put yourself out on a limb with having to defend something that might require like a bunch of brain data, the more likely it is for that time to come about where someone hits you on that, and then you're stuck there without having that data.
And also, like
choose
let's
for
just
yourself.
think about this.
Don't let me influence your choice. That's just my personal opinion on that.
Like, we could have an audience here, right, of rational people. And I could be up against the brain scientists, right? And I could just quite simply state, like my the evidence I have for, you know, animals feeling hope, and he could start going and talking about all this brain science stuff. But to me, like, it's pretty obvious that animals can hope. I mean, if we just use the definition alone. So I don't know, maybe it would be valuable, like, because people could make up their own minds. Well, yeah, my dog hopes. My dog hopes he doesn't get a kick in the butt if he does a pee on the carpet. Like, animal behavior is like really easily like. Scientists have got heaps of data on it, but I just think, like, I don't know, maybe it would be valuable for me to, and then, like, I'm seeing your point, but I'm also seeing maybe in the point of like advocacy with an audience, and for them to make up their own mind, just with their dog alone,
Well, then take my point as just an option, right? Because you don't have to run the same algorithm I do for processing points, right? Like, if you think there's value in it, then absolutely do it. But I'm just kind of making you aware of these other options. Like, there's one option of committing really hard to the pragmatic argument and just being like, no, they can hope. I'm going to plant my feet in the ground and argue that. And then there's an option of just committing really hard to the, okay, I'll just grant that, but in principle, it's not going to land. Like, even if we assume they can't hope, you're not going to murder people who can't hope, name the trait. Or you could do both equivalently, or you could just lightly just make it clear that you're not buying the hope and then land the principled point. So it's like there's a variety of options, and I'm just kind of just painting out the like series of options there for you, so that you have awareness of them, so you don't automatically feel like pigeonholed into all.
I have to stick. Nah, definitely, that's heaps helpful, because then you can sort of, like, depending on the situation, you can go with the one that you know, the one that you feel like is going to be the best outcome at the time. And if you feel like it's not a battle you're going to win, then you've always got, well, if they can't hope, if a human couldn't hope, so you've always got the principal point to fall back on, and it's the strongest. But like, for me, like, to push back on that can animals hope thing, like, it's just like, it's like I don't know, like, it's really, I don't know, it's like that speciesism thing where, like, animals can't hope. Animals aren't smart enough or worthy enough of the word Holocaust, or animals can't feel pain, or like, So.
Yep. No, I completely hear your point. I mean, we talked about this once a long time ago when you and I were talking about some point about humans being biologically herbivores, and I was like, look, dude, like, that getting into that opens up this massive thing where you have to know about like the evolutionary purpose of our body parts and like our anatomy, and like, it's like this just knowledge that you don't have. Like, you're not to defend all the pragmatics on everything, you just need so much like multi-domain knowledge that you're just bound to come up with these situations where it's like, okay, do I really want to get into that? So I was telling you at that point, like, look, it's avoidable. Like, if you want, you can just say, like, look, I don't care what we are biologically. I would hold the same position regardless if we're capable of living without killing them. So it's just the same kind of thing. And the only other thing I'd make clear is, like, the only time when you actually have to hit the pragmatics, I said this earlier, but I'll say it again, is when, if the pragmatics are allowed to land, it will stop you from landing your principal point. So the classic example that I like to use for this is if someone is saying, you know, that animals are going to kill you or something, that would be a valid justification for defending yourself by killing them if necessary, right? I think, just like I would say in a bunch of other situations, right? Like if a bear is trying to attack you, fucking wreck that bear. Obviously, if you have the least harsh way of doing it possible, like you have a trank or something, that should be what you use. But yeah, no, like fucking wreck that bear. A bear doesn't, like, I don't want to get killed by a bear. So if someone, and most people, there's very, very few hardcore pacifists who are just going to say, no, let the bear kill you, right? That's a fringe minority position. So that's a situation where if you let the pragmatics land and they're allowed to create this framing of farmed animals are going to kill you, then that point can land for like pretty much everybody, right? Because everybody is going to be able to go, well, except that fringe minority of like crazy pacifists is going to go, yeah, something's killing you, obviously, try to stop it. So that's a situation where you actually have to address the pragmatics, because your principal point is not going to land for anyone except that small group of radical pacifists. So you have to be like, no, look, farmed animals aren't trying to kill you. So the only point I'm adding is just that the time when you have to address the pragmatics is when, if the pragmatics aren't addressed, your principled point will not land with proper force.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, of course.
Well, avoiding pain is something that plants do. It's a natural
Well, we do.
Hope is not like love. Hope is a complex emotion that requires something more thought out. And personally, that's what I believe qualifies.
Well, I don't know. If they're suffering in a gestation crate, I think they would hope they would be released soon. You know, if you harm an animal for long enough and they're suffering, and then you release them out into a green field and let them free, and then you bring them back into harm, I think they would hope to be out in that green field soon. What you're saying is they don't have any memory, they don't have any desires. Like, I think science is on the side of the complexity of animals' emotional range and their intelligence. I mean, going up against science there, brother.
Yeah, but I know science is on the side of this, because we couldn't whip out studies right there and then, but neither can he. But I'm sure we can all go, like, people can go look into this later. There's plenty of studies on animals and the way they interact with their emotionals. Like, there's so much on it. There's so much on it. So, like, I don't know. I just feel like that, like right there. Like that would have sold even a room full of non-vegans. That would have that was a good battle to fight right there.
Yeah,
I don't know. What do you think?
I think your answer was fine. I mean, like, if he's trying to imply, like, if his definition of hope comes down to things like animals like not having memories or desires, that seems very, like, I don't know. It seems like it would be pretty hard to defend. I think you're probably right that the science would bear your case out. So I don't have any problem with your handling of it there. I would also mention the principal point, actually. I would add in that it would be good to tag that on at the end. But you know, that's my bent also as a person who likes philosophy. I always kind of go towards just the principled answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, as long as you're aware of the array of ways to answer it, that's the most important thing, is to have the tool of knowing the different ways you can answer. So that, like you said, when you're in different situations, you can do whatever is suitable to the situation. Because look, this might not be the perfect example, but someone could give you a pragmatic argument where you legit just don't know how to address the pragmatics, right? Like that could happen, right? And then it would be good to use the principled point. So, you know, as long as you're aware of the options, that's a good thing.
Definitely. This is great. This is excellent.
Cool.
Okay. Exactly.
All right, we'll go for the gentleman there in the yellow.
And I just mentioned I'm gonna need to call this stream in about 5, so we're not gonna get to complete the entire thing. We've gotten through the majority of it, though. Cool with you? Yeah.
Oh no problem at all.
Okay. So I should also ask, actually, is there any specific thing that you really want me to see, or should we just play through for the next few?
I don't remember.
Okay, we'll just play through.
How would you feel if an alien species came along with a higher sentience than us, intelligent, more evolved, and farmed your mum, you,
To be fair, generally when people call my mum a cow, it's in a less roundabout way, but fair enough.
It's not an insult. Cows are beautiful.
Well, I mean, obviously, in virtue of being a human and knowing my capacity for sentience and knowing the complex levels of emotions that we as humans feel, I would have a definite and set series of emotions about it. But I
really?
think, which I believe this is what you're trying to do, to analogize that then to animals, I don't think is quite right, because we've heard Joey say, oh, animals can do this, that, and the other. They can hope, they can experience love and all this sort of thing, which I'm not going to deny outright, because I obviously don't know the science as well as you. But I think that there is uncertain ground there. I think that to completely anthropomorphize the feelings of animals, which is what any discussion of animal feeling is at the end of the day, is, as I said, shaky ground, and so to try and analogize in that way just isn't quite accurate. But if anything, it's testament actually to human.
Sorry again. Question and answer. We have way more people to get through. Yeah. Who's next?
Yeah. So there is like I didn't detect the clear answer there. Like I would have a set feeling about it. So what you're saying is that you wouldn't be okay with it. Like it's basically what I'm hearing. Like,
I have a set feeling about it.
Like imagine like Joey, ask me if I'd be okay with some horrible atrocity.
What do you think about a Holocaust generally?
Well, look, I have some set feeling about it.
No, but he's like more elaborate and eloquent and more descriptive about it. It's like, what do you...
Well, yeah, I mean, because the bottom line is just like, look, he's not okay with it. And so if you are okay with it, if you are okay with the same thing for animals, it's like, what is the basis for breaking the analogy, right? And just saying complex cognition, like, yeah, he can get that off right there because you aren't cross-examining him, but you could just throw a reductio back at him of like, okay, just say we're talking about an unintelligent human, then is it okay?
Exactly.
For the gentleman here at the front.
My question's for Will. When Patrick was talking and he was describing the lab mate versus meat from an animal, he said that there is no trait difference except sentience. You turned around and said, I'd still prefer the animal meat. Why would that be when the only trait difference is sentience?
Well, admittedly, I mean, I think Patrick knows more about lab-grown meat than I do. I mean, it was more an off-the-cuff mark with regards to taste.
The taste is the same. There's no trait difference.
Well, maybe that's the case, and in that case, then, well,
just sentience. You're just the murderer, or you're not.
Brilliant. Maybe we should welcome lab-grown meats, but I have no experience of them, and just from personal experience, I would say I'd go for the.
Do you mind if I come in for a moment?
Yeah. So he'd go for the murder.
Yeah,
exactly. I prefer to go for the murder.
So let's take the total.
He'd prefer to go for the murder. That's basically it.
You're gonna have some.
I like go through that.
Who are never going to convert, right? But there is a group of people who probably want to be vegetarians, but like the taste, and there's probably a tradition there. They grew up meat eaters. And so I'd say that the market of people can potentially be moved to lab-grown meat as the product becomes far more refined and more than 3 companies start making. There was a time when there were only 3 companies.
$10 billion later and 10 years down the track, just go vegan, mate.
That will convert. You will have a bunch of people who will forever. The same reason that some people still hunt elephants and poach tigers now for completely horrendous reasons. But I think that it does open a future for a world where meat remains...
Get off the meat, mate!
...on the menu, but non-murderous.
He's talking to... He's a meat eater. Yeah, he wasn't a vegan. A discussion with him beforehand, so...
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I gotta love Karnas, telling vegans how to strategize. Like, how about we be clear about what is and isn't murder and just use separate terms so we're not calling something that isn't murder. There, problem solved, and also go vegan. All right, well, I mean, I would love to go through more, but I also can't be occupying my friend's house. He is a working person with a real life, so I think we're going to have to call it there. But I had a great time going through this debate, and my overall feeling is I think you're doing great, dude. And I think that one of the best things about you is that you're always very open to criticism, and you're always refining what you're doing. Because all that tells me, well, one of the things that tells me, not all that tells me for any sophists out there, one of the things that tells me is that, you're just going to keep getting better and better. So if we look at Joey like 10 years from now, it's just going to be whatever you're at now, like times a whole bunch. So... Yeah, dude.
Thanks, brother. And I appreciate all of look, watching your stuff has helped refine my arguments a lot. Like that, like
cool,
I learned heaps from that. Like I'm pretty confident in debate now because of watching your stuff for the last few years. So it's helped a lot, and now I go in and teach others who are following me how to work their way through these arguments as well. And I think we should. I think we all need to sort of help raise each other up to this a better, being open to criticism is important. Important constructive criticism, and yeah, so I think this is all epic. The more and more I put myself out there for these type of long drawn out debates, I think I'll get a little bit more into the flow of it, and yeah,
100%.
See how we go.
All right, Joey. Well, it's great doing this with you. I'm just going to close the stream and then, yeah. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. Thanks, Joey, for coming on, and till next time.